And glad to be back on American soil after a little trip to Belfast, Northern Ireland. The weather there was perfect, which never happens. So I'm not going to pretend like it was a bad trip. It was great. We had some incredible fights. We had I know that people didn't watch it. The distribution deal for PFL Europe events in the United States is not, it's above my pay grade, but allow me 2 minutes to tell you how cool this story is, okay? Paul Hughes is a kid who grew up in Belfast, and SSC Arena is their Delta Center, okay? He would run past it, drive past it, walk past it, ride his bike past it, and when he decided he was going to be a mixed martial artist when he was 17 years old, he said, one day I'm going to be the headliner at SSC Arena, and that happened this weekend in Belfast. And it was cool, and it was sold out, and it was amazing. The reason I want to tell you the story is because he had a local artist sing a song called Grace by the Dubliners, which is just one of those songs. It's like Sweet Caroline, although less festive. Everybody in Ireland knows it. Everybody in Ireland can sing along to it. It has a bit of a haunting melody. It's more like a Let It Be type song. Okay? And that's what he walked out to. It was unbelievable. The moment still gives me goosebumps. Imagine that. You're a 17-year-old kid. You say, someday I'm going to sell out the Delta Center. And when you're 27, you do exactly that. Pretty cool. And then if it would be like having Post Malone come out and sing your favorite song and have the entire arena sing it with you. It was so cool. So while you're driving around today, while you're listening today, think about what your walkout song, what would be your song for that moment? And maybe even the artist. Donny Osmond singing for you? I don't know. We don't have that many locally tied big-time artists. But anyway, I'll try to find footage of it and retweet it so you can get a better sense of what it looked like. It was an incredible moment. And today, we are hoping for another memorable, incredible, spectacular moment for the Utah Jazz. 5 o'clock today, the NBA draft lottery, the ping pong balls, the announcements, the tension, the sweaty palms, the representatives gathered, sent from each team. This is going to be a momentous day one way or another in Utah Jazz basketball history. I put some poll questions out where you think it's going to land and what you think the Utah Jazz should do based on the potential that you're not going to land the number one pick. We've talked about it plenty. 14% chance. There are 3 teams with a 14% chance. You're one of them. You can't drop any lower than 5. We know that this draft is stacked with talent, but everyone knows that the prize at the top is Cooper Flagg. And maybe it's better to look at the rest of this draft than it is to focus in and say, oh, it's got to be Cooper Flagg. It's got to be Cooper Flagg. Maybe it's a good question to ask yourself if the obvious number 1 overall guy in the last several NBA drafts has lived up to the hype, has been exactly what he's supposed to be. When's the last time there was a guy who was this much of a consensus number 1 overall pick? Well, Victor Wembanyama obviously is working out quite nicely. What about if you go to like a Zion Williamson? If the Jazz end up drafting Cooper Flagg and he ends up being Zion, is everyone okay with that? Is everyone happy with that? I know that they have different issues in their game and there's different questions to ask about whether or not the fit is right in those places. So the analogy might be a less than ideal one. I'm just trying to find ways you can look at this besides, well, if you get number 1, great. If you don't get number 1, we're going to cry about it. Ideally, there's something else, some meat left on the bone, even if, I don't know, the Pelicans end up getting Cooper Flagg. What do you do? James Peterson producing today. He's back as well. James, you have been the positive side of the ledger for this upcoming NBA draft lottery. In anticipation of today, I have been the doom and gloom. I have been the skeptic. I have been the finger wagger. They're not going to let you have nice things, Jazz fans. And you have been more precocious. You've been more optimistic. You've felt like this is going to end up working out in the Utah Jazz favor. Are you feeling that way today?
Yeah, my feeling is there's no reason why the Jazz can't get the number 1 pick. And I know you more tongue in cheek than actually being serious, and a lot of other people more serious than tongue in cheek think the NBA has enough of a conspiracy against small market teams that they won't ever let that happen. What we've learned from people like Sarah Todd, who've been in the actual NBA draft lottery room for the last couple of years, she will be there again tonight. Andy Larson's going to be in the room. What we've learned from those people about the process tells you there's no way it can be rigged. It's pretty foolproof.
I don't know if I believe it.
It's pretty foolproof because they draw like 4 or 5 balls. And it's like the lottery at various states where you have to get the right combination and then you get this pick, right? They do it in front of everybody in that room, like 20 or 30 reporters who cover the teams in the lottery, a bunch of league executives and other team executives. It's not the old frozen envelope thing, which back when Patrick Ewing was picked, it probably wasn't as complex of a process because that was the first draft lottery. You can't do the frozen envelope anymore.
You can do the frozen ping pong ball.
I suppose you could
Thermodynamics change the way that those balls are going to behave.
I suppose you could do 4, 5, 6 frozen ping pong balls.
James, all I'm saying is we have put a man on the moon. Elon Musk is now launching rockets and bringing them back to land, okay? There are androids walking around.
Nothing's impossible, I suppose.
We have thinking computers now. You're telling me they can't get a ping pong ball to fall the way they want it to in a multi-billion-dollar industry? I'm not going to spend more than 10 seconds.
They might, but I also I feel like the absolute myth buster of an argument, of a one-liner back at that, is one I've given you multiple times and our listeners multiple times. How in the bleep would you argue that the Minnesota Timberwolves are a desirable enough franchise and location for the number 1 overall pick to land twice in the last 6 years, and then say they wouldn't want to give the number 1 pick to Salt Lake City? 10 years, you're right. And then say they'll never let it be in Utah. Minnesota is not. If they can get it twice, anybody can get it. Cleveland got it twice.
That's a good point.
Got it 3 times in 10 years. One of those, yes, their favorite son from Akron was LeBron James. That one you can set aside. But then LeBron, when he left in free agency, they got it twice in 4 years. Cleveland, the butt of every joke in America.
Okay, James, you're making a compelling argument here because
it can come here, and it will tonight.
Here's if you're going to be like I am, right? You're going to be the conspiracy theorist, and you're going to say, all right, which of these markets is truly like, yes, we have to set them up for success in the NBA's eyes, which is a valuable enough market that the NBA is like, I want to do them a favor. Or maybe more importantly, I want to hurt this team, right? In 2015, the Minnesota Timberwolves got the number 1 overall pick. Do you know who got the number 2 overall pick that year?
Ooh.
Whose lottery
the
odds?
Lakers.
It was the Lakers.
Yeah, Brandon Ingram to the Lakers.
D'Angelo Russell.
Oh, D'Angelo Russell, sorry. Yeah.
2016, it was Philadelphia. Do you know who the number 2 pick was?
Also the Lakers.
That was the Ingram draft.
Right.
So
they had it 3 years in a row, didn't they? Because Lonzo Ball was the year after.
That's right. They got the number 2 pick 3 years in a row. Good knowledge by you, James. Good NBA draft knowledge by you. 2017, Markelle Fultz goes number 1. Lonzo Ball goes number 2. And this is maybe a place for Utah Jazz fans to reassure themselves, to be like, even if you don't get number 1, it might be okay. The number 3 pick in the 2017 draft, you know who that was.
Yeah, Jason Tatum.
Jason Tatum. Josh Jackson was 4. De'Aaron Fox was 5. Okay?
Yeah. So two out of the top 5 all-star, borderline superstar players in the case of De'Aaron Fox. Jason Tatum certainly a superstar.
In 2018, the Phoenix Suns. Now, I have yet to find, besides Minnesota in 2015, we're not talking about markets that are really comparable to Salt Lake City. These are all, and even Minnesota's really not.
Minnesota's
they're the closest.
Higher population,
yes.
Right?
Minnesota's the closest analogy, but they are a larger television market.
Cold, way colder than Salt Lake. But
it's very cold.
But they always talk about NBA doesn't like cold weather cities either, unless it's New York City or Boston.
Yeah.
So
Julius Randle talked about that and said that he's really fit in nicely.
Oh.
And that it, kind of like you'll hear players telling everyone to back off the reputation of Salt Lake City. He did kind of that with Minnesota. They caught up with him, and he's like, "Look, man, it's cold here, but besides that, it's good living. People are really nice. It's cool." It was interesting to see that.
Yeah.
But back, okay, so 2018, Phoenix with the number 1 pick, and they took DeAndre Ayton. You know who went number 3 that year?
Yeah, Luka.
You know who went number 5 that year?
Trae
Young.
Traded for each other.
Jaren Jackson, Marvin Bagley, filling in that 2019, and this is a sort of the hype equivalent for me, right? Everyone in the world wanted the Dookie Zion Williamson. They were just like, we need this guy. New Orleans gets him, and you look at it and you say, all right, yeah, he's been a good player, but he hasn't played enough. Yeah, and it hasn't worked. That hasn't been worth the number 1 pick.
No. You have to, when he's on the floor, he's absolutely a guy who you say can live up to that number 1 overall pick thing, but he's never on the floor. That's the problem.
Number 2 pick that year was
Morant.
John Morant. James, by the way, give yourself 100 James Peterson bonus points for knowing these off the top of your head.
It's just up in here. Yeah, I don't know.
R.J. Barrett, DeAndre Hunter, Darius Garland rounding out the top 5 in the 2019 draft.
Good top 5. Barrett hasn't lived up to the hype at all, but he's been a solid player, certainly an NBA starter. DeAndre Hunter's been an NBA starter, more of a role player, and Darius Garland's an all-star on the best team in the East in the regular season anyway.
COVID year. Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards to Minnesota. Again, this is the second time in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
That the Timberwolves get the number 1 overall pick. Number 2 is James Wiseman to Golden State. LaMelo Ball, as you already referenced, to number 3 to the Hornets. Patrick Williams, Isaac Okoro, rounding out the top 5. I'm only going to 5 for obvious reasons to everyone listening, because that's the lowest the Utah Jazz can pick. All right? 2021, Cade Cunningham. That's Detroit. Now, Detroit, I look at Detroit, and I'm just like, that – Detroit should be a city that nobody wants to live in.
Yeah.
I've been to Detroit. Detroit is Canada, but it's like gritty and economically depressed.
And people have been leaving Detroit in droves for the last few decades, unfortunately.
Because of the death of the American manufacturing industry, unfortunately.
It's a sad story.
It's terrible. There was a time, like I think it was during COVID, the Bears of Detroit, did you see this? Did you see this on YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
There were black bears like wandering through neighborhoods in Detroit because people just, the exodus of population and jobs. So Detroit, and we root them on for the bounce back as a community.
Yes.
But Detroit, there's a lot of warts to a place like that. And the NBA, again, I'm now supporting James's point rather than trying to support my own.
I didn't even think of Detroit, but that certainly applies as one. If they can get the number 1 pick, then a place like Salt Lake City can get it. Yeah.
Jalen Green went number 2 to Houston. Evan Mobley to Cleveland. Again, another guy we're talking about. He was a defensive player of the year candidate this year. Scotty Barnes, Jalen Suggs rounding out the top 5.
Another pretty good top 5 there. if it turns out, if the Jazz don't get number 1 and aren't able to draft Cooper Flag, if it turns out like the 2021 or the 2021 draft and the 2020 and 2021 drafts, then they should be able to get a really good player.
2022, and again, I hate supporting James's points, but if you're gonna allow the Orlando Magic to draft number 1 overall,
they've done what's that 4 times now, the Magic, because Dwight Howard, Shaq, Chris Webber that turned into Penny Hardaway, and Paolo Banchero,
Paolo Banchero number 1 in 2022 to Orlando. And I spent a lot of time. I spent 4 out of 5 weeks in Orlando. 2 years ago, I spent 8 weeks in a row in Orlando. The year before that, another 8 weeks in a row in Orlando.
You're now an expert.
I go to Orlando. I've been to Orlando a lot more than pretty much every Utah has, okay? I will say this.
Just saying something with the Disney love around
here.
The
Magic are somehow, tragically, an afterthought even in that community.
Yeah. One of the Jazz beat writers who's on the other station lived there for a while because his wife worked at Disney World, and he was saying the same thing to us that he listened to sports talk radio just because he's a sports fan and also just because he's curious what moves the needle in Orlando. Magic he was there when they went to the finals. And they still were never talked about on sports talk radio.
It's insane. You go to Orlando, you'll see more people in Salt Lake City wearing Orlando Magic throwback gear than you will in Orlando. It's nuts.
And they've been bad a lot, but they've had a pretty rich history for a team that's not been around that long.
Well, that's the thing. There are plenty of markets where you have this kind of a situation. The Orlando are the professional sports team. They have an MLS team. It's very analogous to Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
All right? The major difference being, I give credit to Jazz fans. Like, especially this year, it was an unwatchable product on purpose, and people still showed up to the games. Now, Smith Entertainment Group did some things manipulating concessions prices and tickets prices and making it more of a family experience than rather like you're there because you're a big fan of what you're watching.
They fudged the old consecutive sellout streak numbers like every organization does. They try to milk the consecutive sellout streak because it's great PR.
Yes, Rice Eccles has been on a consecutive sellout streak with plenty of empty seats.
Yeah,
it's fine.
But it was still, I mean, at the lowest in games that I went to, and I only was able to go to a couple, maybe a dozen or so games this year. But the games that I went to, it was still at least 75 to 80% full. I mean, sometimes it was a true I couldn't find an empty seat in the building, which is, like you said, remarkable for a team that won 16 games and was trying to only win that many.
And by the way, a lot of that was because of visiting teams fan.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, Orlando doesn't have that dynamic. It's crazy. Most communities where it's like the only show in town, this is our team. Everyone's just like, awesome, this is our team. Now we're up to 3 pro franchises in Salt Lake City, due hopefully to get a 4th by 2030, excuse me. And I think that, people at that point will have to kind of do the math and decide which they are really going to be the diehards of. There was no question for years that it was the Utah Jazz. In Orlando, it feels to me like that's not how it has worked out. And still, the NBA has gifted Orlando plenty of number 1 overall picks. 2023, obviously, that was Victor Wembanyama, Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, Amin Thompson, Asar Thompson. And then the last year's draft, you got to see how it works out. Atlanta goes first, then Washington, Houston, San Antonio, and Detroit. Zachary Reese-Sachet, Alexander Sarr, Reed Shepard, Stephon Castle, Ron Holland. A really big back and forth here with the international talent, by the way, versus the American talent, the NCAA products. The reason I gave you that 10-year history is because tonight's NBA draft lottery is massively important for the future of the Utah Jazz, but the number 1 overall pick is not the only positive outcome. And maybe I'm saying that more to convince myself than to convince any of you. But there are plenty of great players. And these, by the way, are not the outlier guys that emerged from the second round to be Hall of Famers. I'm not discussing that. I'm not giving you those guys as examples.
Jazz will have chances to do that with the
Minnesota pick,
which is going to be in the 20s. And then they've got 2 picks in the second round. So they'll have a chance to try to find someone like that. But when you have a shot at the number 1 pick and at lowest the top 5, you're not thinking about, oh, maybe we can find a diamond in the rough with our other picks. No, you're trying to hit on that pick. And then, of course, the reason why you hire a scouting department is so that they can do their best to identify those diamonds in the roughs. But that's not what you should be focusing on as a Jazz fan tonight and when the draft rolls around.
Donovan Mitchell was drafted number 13. Up until this last performance, he was averaging 41 points a game. And yet still, Cavs on the brink of elimination.
We had a texter, maybe a couple of texters the day that we
didn't like us going in on Donovan.
Didn't like the way that I wouldn't say that we were as critical as many other people, particularly nationally, have been of Donovan Mitchell over the years, but we were not overly positive. I'll say this: they made some good points. They've had plenty of injuries, and now Donovan's injured and questionable for the next game, if not the rest of this series. He's been tasked to carry way more of the load. The counter argument to that is, and why it still should be on his shoulders that they have not performed well enough in this series against Indiana for the most part, is that the guy's always taken the lion's share of the load. He is as close a thing to Allen Iverson, and not in style of play. Allen Iverson was a different animal in that way. But the closest thing to an Allen Iverson type player that we've had in the league since Iverson, it was in his prime. And by that I mean a guy who, no matter how many co-stars you tried to put by him, it just worked better when he was a lone wolf star player. And that was to Iverson's detriment in most years. And that's kind of how we're seeing play out with Donovan Mitchell. He works better by himself because of whatever reason, and you couldn't really put your finger on it with Iverson. I can't really put my finger on it with Donovan Mitchell. Individually, they work better that way. The teams maybe do better, but they don't necessarily have enough to get close to a championship. Iverson did go to the finals, but beyond that, they didn't necessarily have enough to get close to a championship. So injuries, yes, he's had to take that on, but he's always taken on that kind of a load. And the teams have hit a ceiling every single time here in Utah and the last couple of years in Cleveland. I hope they can come up with he can be healthy and they can come up with a storybook comeback over the Pacers. It just doesn't look like that right now.
Fill in the blank for me on this sentence, James. Today is the blank most important day in Utah Jazz history. Is it the very most important day in Utah Jazz history? I've heard people say that. I'm not willing to say that just yet.
I don't think so.
When you're up, like, the most important day in Utah Jazz history is probably let's take it out of the business realm, okay?
Yeah.
So not the acquisition of the Utah Jazz.
Like games.
We're talking about like the player personnel.
Okay.
Like the drafting of Karl Malone is the most important day in Jazz history. Or maybe the acquisition of John Stockton is the most important day in Jazz history. Those are Hall of Famers. Those are the identity of your franchise. Taking the business side out of it, so not Larry Miller mortgaging whatever he had to mortgage to keep the team here in town. Not obviously the Jazz showing up in Salt Lake City in the first place. Not Ryan Smith buying the Jazz or the Miller family's decision to sell the Jazz. The competitive side of this. I mean, you were in the NBA Finals against Michael Jordan. Those days, those days are, I think, more important than this draft day. But it's still way, way, way up there.
It is. I think that it might be top 5 because you got to say there's an argument between Game 6 of Rockets, Western Conference Finals against the Rockets in 97 when Stockton hits the shot that sends them to the finals. And Game 6, a year later of the NBA Finals, when Jordan pushes off and they lose when they had a really good chance at forcing a Game 7 at home, and everyone felt good about them winning Game 7 and winning the NBA championship.
Did you know that is still the most watched game in NBA history?
Yeah.
NBC made the announcement today that Michael Jordan himself is going to join their NBA coverage as a special contributor. What that looks like, I'm hyper curious.
He might be what I pictured when they said that is he's not going to be on every pre-half and post-game show, but he'll be on a lot. Kind of like what we saw with Wayne Gretzky with TNT hockey coverage. He wasn't on everyone, and I'm not even sure he's on it anymore because I haven't seen him at all during the playoffs. But he wasn't on everyone for those first couple of years, but he was on a good amount that they tried to roll him out there to jack up the ratings.
I put a poll question out about this. How do we feel like this is going to work with Michael Jordan? Michael Jordan is he's a complicated guy, right? I don't know if he's
Absolutely.
like as happy-go-lucky, as charismatic as Chuck and Shaq have worked out to be, right? Maybe he'll take himself a little bit less seriously. Michael Jordan feels like he's got a lot more in common with the Tom Brady type personality, where there was some rigidity to Tom making that transition and serving in that role. And that's fine. It's not bad. I'm not among those who are just like, Tom Brady sucks at this. It just is different and a little bit drier. I'm really curious to see what it looks like with Michael Jordan. The one thing that I hope for with Michael Jordan is that right from the jump, he will do the thing that now Shaq feels comfortable doing and Charles Barkley feels comfortable doing. Those guys will criticize anyone. They'll say anything about anyone, knowing that player might get mad and have something to say back and whatever. Like, it took them time to get that way. Michael Jordan can start out that way because there's nobody, with the exception of LeBron James, who has any business talking back to Michael Jordan about their opinion of the game, which is wild, I know. But
yeah, I hope he's able to have some kind of humor, but I don't know if that's part of Jordan's public persona. I just don't know if it's possible.
I don't know. I don't even know what Jordan's public persona is at this point.
Yeah, that's a good.
He's enigmatic.
He's for as much of the spotlight that he soaked up as a player, and he didn't necessarily do it the way Kobe did, where sometimes it seemed super contrived, but he was just on him all the time. He's since he retired, he's had like almost none of the spotlight, and he was the owner of a team.
When is the last time you heard Michael Jordan speak publicly?
I mean, probably Last Dance.
And that was effectively scripted by Michael Jordan and his camp.
Yeah, that is probably Last Dance, and
he's one of the most famous people on planet Earth without us ever having to hear him open his mouth. It's a really, really odd dynamic.
Yeah.
And now you're going to go to the opposite end of that spectrum where they're just going to be like, Mike, what do you think about this player, this game, this coach, this happening in the NBA? And he's apparently going to give us his opinion on all of it. We haven't heard Michael Jordan's opinion ever. He deliberately did not offer his opinions as a player because he didn't want to alienate people. Republicans buy sneakers too.
That's the only. I mean, he didn't give his opinion there, but that's the only thing close to controversial.
His responsibility to offer an opinion for business reasons, and I'm not here to criticize him for it, but it's just the other end of the spectrum. It's going to be really interesting, and we'll talk more about it a little bit later in the show. NBA playoffs are going on. NHL playoffs are going on as well. And Florida Panthers, Toronto Maple Leafs is heating up. I think the next game, I think you're going to see a fight after the opening faceoff. We'll see if Tom Callahan agrees. Sean O'Connell Show. Tom Callahan joins us next on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
Here comes Bennett in on right wing. He cuts across the slot, turns and scores! He outweighted Joseph Wall. It's 2-0 Panthers.
More patience than a doctor. What an unbelievable play from Sam Bennett. A turnover forced at their own blue line by the Panthers, and the patience to be able to fake backhand, go to the forehand, and back up. And Sam Bennett has doubled the lead for the Florida Panthers.
That's John Ollers on a call from Sports USA. We are your home of the Stanley Cup playoffs on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. That was a Panthers insurance goal, third period last night, a Game 4 win over the Leafs. Talking NHL playoffs and the future of the Utah Hockey Club franchise, which is now officially the Utah Mammoth, baby. Tom Callahan, Locked On Mammoth podcast. No longer the Utah Hockey Club. Get used to it, ladies and gentlemen. We're all Mammoth now. Tom Callahan, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I feel good about family having a name for this franchise, and Mammoth works for me. So,
looks great. Up and down I-15, you got the billboards up. The logo, I think, was greeted with a lot of success. The gear is out, and more of it being shipped, I think, in just a couple of days. The launch, in your mind, as successful as we could have hoped for?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's been great. And, they haven't even started selling it online yet, but they've already created this crazy rush. They're going to do drops. It's almost like we're doing celebrity collections here. So watch for your latest, Locked On Mammoth crossover. It's cool the way they're doing it because it's now, number one, it's created something unique for everybody who has year one Utah Hockey Club stuff. Like, okay, you're the OG. You were the originals. I think we talked about this a year ago. But now that there's a name and an identity, they're playing it up well, and they're doing it in little bits, which is keeping the excitement up, and some new merch pops out here and there, and NHL.com doesn't even have it yet, so you can really only get it locally, and it makes you feel, pretty special. So I think they're doing a great job with it.
So I want to talk about the playoffs that are happening right now. Stanley Cup playoffs, for all of you who are uninitiated, have been phenomenal this year. They continue to be fiery, and Leafs-Panthers got extra chippy at the end of the game last night. The refs are having to push everyone to the dressing rooms. Tkachuk it seemed like he was promising violence to start Game 5. Do we see a fight right off the top, like opening face-off, gloves get dropped, or because this is the Stanley Cup playoffs and 5 for fighting is, potentially detrimental to your team, are they going to let this cool off instead?
Well, it's not going to cool off. This is going to continue to smolder. This series, especially in this last game, it kind of started, delving into the cheap shot realm. But it's physical. It's at the edge, if not over it sometimes. These are two teams that absolutely want to win. And they're so well matched. 2-2 is where the series should be. I did catch that, though. I saw him leaning over the bench, and it was Willie Nylander, who was the Leafs' leading goal scorer in the regular season, and he was kind of indicating, hey, buddy, you're next. And knowing who issued the threat, number one, but who it's directed at, number two, what you're hoping to do there is, given the cheap shot to Barkov at the end of that game right in the back, it's saying, hey, keep this in your mind. You're going to get rolled. And what that does is it makes Willie Nylander look over his shoulder, and it makes everybody focus on Tkachuk, and it can get Toronto off their game if they let it. And so it's psychological warfare as much as anything else. Do I think he's going to run into Willie Nylander? Oh, absolutely. And things will go from there.
That game will be on ESPN 5 p.m. on Wednesday. So mark the calendar for it. It's 2-2, and, on paper that means tied. Does anyone have an upper hand in your mind right now?
You know what? The home teams have held serve. Here's the one reason why I thought Toronto did having home ice, but I no longer do, is I thought Sergei Bobrovsky, there's two personalities that live inside that goaltender. There is regular season Bob, and then there's the guy they call playoff Bob. Playoff Bob is almost impossible to beat. Playoff Bob is a different evolution of the goaltender and the one who won the Stanley Cup for them last year, especially in Game 4. That's the first time I think I really saw a full playoff Bob game. And especially when talking about Austin Matthews, is one of the guys that's expected to score for Toronto and really hasn't. And I don't even know if he's 100%, to be honest with you. But Bobrovsky made a big glove save on him at one point, and he kind of gave him a look after that. And I thought that look comes from playoff Bob, who is confident and cocksure and is not letting pucks by him without a massive fight. And I think Florida now has the edge.
Aside from that series, which is the low-hanging fruit with all of the chippiness, what is the most intense and exciting for you? Jets, Stars, Knights, Oilers, Caps, Hurricanes.
I think so. Knights Oilers has plenty of intrigue for Western Conference fans, so I'll talk about that one for just a moment because Edmonton is kind of, teetering on heartbreak and disappointment once again, and Vegas is alive, and it looked like Edmonton had a chance to kind of run with the ball, and they dropped it. So now all of a sudden the Golden Knights win, and it's only a 2-1 instead of a 3-0 Edmonton lead. And now the doubt creeps in, right, if you're the Oilers, just because it does. When you fail to even to lose in the Stanley Cup final, but you still have that doubt. It's like, well, we haven't gotten to win the cup yet. Things like that can get on you. So I'm interested to see how that one's going to go. But honestly, I think if we talk about the Stars-Jets series, number one, I picked Winnipeg to win the cup, and I'm very surprised at how they've been responding. But number two, for all the things that Mikko Rantanen is, especially in the regular season, I just told you about playoff Bob. This is playoff Mikko Rantanen. And he is carrying the Dallas Stars right now. The Stars finished with the worst finish of anyone who made the playoffs. They lost 7 in a row. They looked terrible going in. They lost Jason Robertson. They had some other bumps and bruises and injuries, and Rantanen wasn't playing great. All of a sudden, he has woken up, is posting multiple point games like they're going out of style. Dallas has suddenly become the most interesting team to me to watch because if they are finding their form now and going on a run, that should frighten every other team left.
I thought maybe Rantanen was just like fueled by spite and wanted to get back at his former team and that it would cool off after that series was over. But it seems like this is it's beyond that for him right now, and he's hit a different groove. How do guys do that? I mean, it's such a long season. Everyone's got bumps and bruises, and it feels like this would be a time where maybe the opposite would start happening for individuals, but the extra gear has been found in goal, in this case with a guy who will give you assists and goals. How do they pull it off?
You know what's kind of wild to me is having watched some players, and some players signed huge contracts off it, Sean, and made careers out of it by showing off in the playoffs. And some people enjoy the big stage. Everybody's human, right? You're playing a sport. You're still human. Some guys wilt under the spotlight, or gals, and some rise to the occasion. And I can think of this is going back more than a couple of years, but Joel Ward got not one but 2 contracts based off of playoff performances. John Druce, another former Washington Capital, really made a reputation off of one playoffs. But when you do that one time and you show that you're a clutch player, now teams begin to buy into the mystique, and they're like, well, they did it once, and this is a big-time player. We just need him to be a big-time player again. And they do. And so what Mikko Rantanen's doing right now, I mean, mercurial can be, I mean, just a bit of a pest, right? If things aren't going his way, he isn't happy, like that doesn't bode well for your team. But then when it's time for the Mikko Rantanen show, steps up and does huge things. And, same thing we're seeing right now with Sergei Bobrovsky in Florida. And, you look to see who is going to be this year's playoff hero and who is that player that steps up. And the superstars do it all the time, so much so that when they don't have a good game, we kind of go, what's wrong with that guy? He's human. He had a bad night. But, you love to see just the players who elevate their game. I don't care what the sport is. When you feel someone is exceptional and on a tear, you have to watch that.
Tom Callahan, my guest here, talking some Stanley Cup playoffs on a Monday. You mentioned Bobrovsky, and I've said it many times, very few positional players in any sport can have a greater effect on a team sport than when an NHL goaltender gets hot. And, NFL quarterback is the only one that probably has a better argument. And even that one's up for debate for me. Aside from Bobrovsky, who do you trust most in goal right now?
Oh, boy. Great question. Because there have been a couple of injuries that have been going around. Logan Thompson, who is in Washington, that guy's an absolute stud and is finally out from under the weird Vegas goaltending carousel they've had for a long time. Goes to Washington, lights it up. Unfortunately, is now dinged up, and who knows when we're going to see him again. But I love Logan Thompson, and I think that's a huge guy to have in net for Washington. But I think Washington's got a good tandem there. The other guy, though, and the series, I'll go back to the series. The two guys to watch, too, in net are Jake Ottinger and Connor Hellebuck, because they are both elite. I mean, they're both top five. They're going head-to-head right now. Jake Ottinger is talking about voices in his head telling him to peel the skin off his face, which is an actual quote. Goalies are weird. I should know. But then you have Connor Hellebuck, who's saying nobody studies the game more than me, but has been wildly inconsistent. He's been up, he's been down, and he's kind of getting a reputation of a guy who it's a coin flip what kind of game you're going to get in the playoffs from him after being regular season dominant. So right now, I trust Ottinger more in that series. And actually, the other Western series with Aiden Hill and right now Stuart Skinner, because it looks like Pickard got hurt and is not going to be back anytime soon. Those are the two guys that I'm the most nervous about if I'm either one of those two teams as far as my goal is.
As you mentioned, your pick for the Cup, is your opinion of who's a real contender changed in this second series?
I really want Winnipeg to prove me right, but holy cow, Dallas looks good. And I figured Winnipeg would get through. I actually picked the Kings to finally beat the Oilers. They did not. But now that the Oilers are through, they can outscore a lot of teams. And if Vegas doesn't continue to play well defensively, they'll get beat in the series. But Dallas, to me, looks like the team in the West. Getting it done. In the East, Florida's emerging as a favorite again. Unless Toronto can derail them, Washington's not getting the timely scoring. Carolina is playing well as a team, but I don't think they're better than either Florida or Toronto. And Alex Ovechkin is kind of gone quiet, which, look, he was going to run out of gas at some point, right? But if he's running out of gas now, this is the worst possible timing for Washington. So if you're asking me now who I think, with the benefit of hindsight, who's going to be in the final, I think it's going to be Dallas against Florida.
How nervous does that idea make the entire nation of Canada, who hasn't had one of their franchises win a cup in, what are we looking at, 32 years now?
Yeah, the 93 Montreal Canadiens were the last Canadian team to win a cup. I mean, same story, different year for Leaf fans. They haven't won since 1967 when there were only 6 teams in the NHL. So that frustration continues for them. I really think Winnipeg believed it had a chance. And anytime you get in the tournament itself, you have a chance. Ottawa, their star is just starting to rise. So they'll have time. Montreal star is just starting to rise. They'll have time. But I think anyone who's pinning their hopes on Toronto year after year, look, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. I know how this goes. And it's disappointing and it's difficult, but there's just always seems to be one or two teams better than you. And I don't think Canada gets a cup this year.
How much does that hurt in Edmonton when you've got Leon Draisaitl, you've got Connor McDavid, you've got a supporting cast, and the hopes would be justifiably high there. I'm with you on the Leafs because history tends to repeat itself in sports, But you got two of the best 10 players in the world on the same team. That should be good enough to get you at least to a cup.
Yeah, and I mean, and it was last year, but they don't have goaltending, and their defense, I don't know why. They have never built their defense, at least to my way of thinking, what would be proper, and they've always kind of taken flyers on goaltenders, and I don't understand why. Look, I know there's cap constraints, but I had a very serious conversation with some other NHL people just last week, and I didn't take nearly as much heat for the opinion I'm about to give you, and I actually expected to get more pushback on it. I think Connor McDavid might go down in history as the best player to never win a Stanley Cup.
Ooh.
He may never win a cup. Edmonton is not supporting him. They're not backing him the way they need to. They're just their defense and goaltending away, and until they fix those issues, he and Draisaitl, no matter how amazing they are, no matter how often they finish 1-2 in league scoring, it does take a team to be able to win. And to your remarks earlier about how a goaltender can take over a series, absolutely they can. But the Oilers have not had one who can in McDavid's career.
Sobering thought if you're an Oiler fan, or if you're Connor McDavid potentially. Last thing before I let you go, do you like Wayne Gretzky as an analyst? I'm asking because NBC announced that Michael Jordan is going to come out of his life as a hermit, and he's going to be a special contributor to NBA coverage. And obviously, they're the analogs for one another in basketball and hockey. Do you like Gretzky, the great one, as a guy who talks hockey?
Yes and no. And when I was doing games for Nashville, I had the opportunity to interview Gretzky when he was coaching Phoenix at the time, and he's not a good interview. He's really not, and he doesn't always explain the things that he's thinking, which he's thinking at a crazy elite level, and maybe that's part of the reason why it's hard to put into words. But when I love Gretzky, so I don't like Gretzky X's and O's. When I love Gretzky is when he's telling stories, when he relates it to something from his Stanley Cup days with the Oilers, or from his move to L.A., or maybe playing with Messier in New York, or something like that. I love that part of it, and I think he's wildly entertaining. I think he is one of the few people who can rivet people just by the content of his stories. So I like him in that mode. But, I mean, if you're looking for somebody to break stuff down, I don't necessarily want to come to Wayne for that.
Tom, always appreciate your time and your insight. Enjoy the games tonight, and we'll chat again soon.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on, Sean.
Locked On Mammoth podcast. NHL insider Tom Callahan. Really a wealth of knowledge when you're talking anything that has to do with a puck or a stick or the ice. Really do tune in and watch some of these playoffs. It's so much fun. The hockey is fast. It is furious. And guys are really trying to, achieve the dream of hoisting that cup. The superstition, all of it that comes in is just so fantastic. All right. A quarterback with Utah connections is going to be the greatest QB in the history of the NFL, at least according to one metric. I'll tell you what that is next. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Make sure you're listening in 2 hours. We'll be giving away some more golf, courtesy of the Utah Golf Association, Festival of Tees, and Mountain America Credit Union. We do it on the Down and Dirty with Scott Mitchell right here on the Sean O'Connell Show and on the Drive with Spence Checketts. 18 holes to Bonneville that we'll be giving away. Hot Lunch this week brought to you by E3 Energy Cubes. Go to e3energycubes.com. Pick out your favorite flavor. They're awesome. Non-GMO, no high glycemic sweeteners. Incredible. Sustained energy for your life. All right. Jackson Dart, according to one metric, will be the best quarterback in NFL history.
Hot take.
Are you familiar with the SPS?
Vaguely.
Star Predictor Score is a test that you get measured on, and they spit out a result predicting your ability to create big-time fantasy points, which, of course, translates most of the time to success in the NFL. Jackson Dart scored a perfect 100, first time anyone's ever scored a perfect 100. The other top performers on this one, Lamar Jackson, 99. Jalen Hurts, also a 99. Ben Roethlisberger, 97.7. Patrick Mahomes, 96.2. Deshaun Watson, off-the-field issues notwithstanding or factored into SPS, a 96. Cam Newton, a 94.8. Josh Allen, a 92.9. Jackson Dart scored higher than all these guys. He's going to be the best.
There's, other pre-massage therapist shenanigans with Deshaun Watson. There's not a miss on any of those with any of those guys as far as star talent, and in particular guys who can rack up fantasy points. Which it's interesting. Interesting that they've got a metric for players who can be basically the best fantasy players.
Jackson Dart. Here's my question for Jackson Dart, who, by the way, they did one of those little social media things where, the tiny microphone thing that Utah football does, where they ask questions, just random questions. They asked Giants players the other day, what year do you have to be born in or before to be considered old? And, there was a veteran on the team. He's like, I don't know, the 60s, sometime in the 60s. Guess what Jackson Dart's answer was?
He probably said 99, pre-2000.
He's a 2003 baby, he mentions.
Okay.
He said if you're born before 1985, you're old.
Oh, okay. Still not old over here.
I am old. I was born in 83.
Oh. Ouch.
I was like, what the heck? That's not old.
It's like, take that, OC.
So a little stab in the gut from old Jackson Dart on the age front.
Is it? Because 40, for a long time, the joke was you're over the hill, which was code for saying you're old.
Yeah.
Right?
Which statistically is still true. You're over the hill because, you're on the downside of your life.
Yeah.
From an age standpoint, most people don't live to be 80 on average.
Still in the 70s.
It's still 76
right?
or something as an American.
So, but it feels like the perception, that's completely changed. 40 perception-wise doesn't seem to be over the hill anymore.
Yeah.
Is it 50 now? Is 50 the new 40?
I guess, but then you see Tom Cruise, who's got another Mission Impossible movie coming out, and he's in his 60s and is still jumping off airplanes, and I don't know. I tell you what, for us gentlemen especially, testosterone replacement, a bunch of my friends are getting into this now, and it just extends your prime. It's insane. By the way, not yet on that train, but it gets more and more tempting every time I see someone's results. Terrifying. Anyway, Jackson Dart, according to the Star Predictor Score metric, will be at least in the same company as Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Ben Roethlisberger, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen. He scored higher than all of them on the SPS score.
Only 2 Super Bowl champions on that short list you gave, though, that are in the 90s on that score?
Let's see. Roethlisberger and Mahomes. Well, you don't give Jalen Hurts any Super Bowls?
I forget. Yes. My bad.
Oh, man.
I omitted the guy
Why
who
are you
just
that guy?
won.
Yeah. Why are you being
3.
that guy?
So there's 3.
There's 3.
Yeah, so
And
that's interesting.
Let's see. Lamar Jackson, MVP.
Yeah.
Ben Roethlisberger, was he an MVP?
He was not an MVP.
Patrick Mahomes, MVP.
And Josh Allen just won an MVP. Hey, don't forget the guy who just won, okay?
Josh Allen MVP, Cam Newton MVP.
Who would do that? Who would forget a guy who just won something?
So this predicts that Jackson Dart, former Roy Royal and Corner Canyon Charger.
Don't forget the Roy Royals.
I almost said Corner Canyon Cougar, but they couldn't name it that because of the connotations.
Yeah.
Jackson Dart he's going to win at least an MVP based on this.
Was he got like a 60% chance of either winning an MVP or a Super Bowl, if not both?
Yeah.
According to if he lands in that same short list.
Let's see. It would be an 80%.
80% chance.
80% chance.
So guarantee it. Charles Barkley guarantee Jackson Dart future MVP at the very least, if not Super Bowl champion.
Congratulations to Jackson Dart for scoring a perfect 100 on the SPS rating. Also, it is hilarious. If you want to know what Jackson Dart's practice completion percentage is, if you want to know what his numbers are indoor or outdoor at the practice facility, that's one of the joys of being a quarterback in New York for the coverage. You can find it. Twitter, the coverage is very intense. They will mark every single completion in practice, in drills. Every drop, every incompletion that's his fault, every incompletion that is not his fault. We say it sometimes almost as a reflex and as something that's like, you don't even think about. Oh, yeah, New York, the pressure is a lot higher. It really is. In these big markets, like, it's happening in certain places as well with Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. But if you're like the Houston Texans backup quarterback right now, nobody is tracking your drops and your completions and your incompletions in practice, in minicamp, no less. In New York, they're doing it all. All right, we'll take a quick one here. Scott Mitchell, host of the Down and Dirty, Utah football quarterbacking legend. He joins us next on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Well, welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. We inch closer to a big moment in Utah Jazz history. Just under 5 hours from now, the 2025 NBA Draft Lottery will take place. Plenty of coverage right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Scott Mitchell talked about it earlier today, and we'll talk about it again with him here. The Utah football legend joins me. Scott, what's up?
Well, Saturday night, I went to the Bare Knuckle Fight Championship.
Scott, I heard I was listening to Down and Dirty, and I heard you talking about this. You're all in.
You know, it's the closest I think you can get to being a gladiator. Watching, I could see how the people in the Colosseum in Rome could just get engrossed in the spectacle of the battle, because there's no gloves, there's no protection. Somebody's walking out of that ring bloodied.
That's right.
And they're probably not walking. They're going to end up on the ground. Oh wow.
Did you find yourself repulsed by the blood, or maybe caught up in the bloodlust? Are you pro or anti blood?
I have to tell you, it went both directions. Like, there were times when it was just like, wow, it was just so raw and so emotional and so just kind of, I was into it. This one guy, Sean, he's getting pummeled. Like, and two former MMA guys, and you can kind of see how they fight. You know, it's a little bit, their style, their comfort level, and the one guy is just getting pounded. And he's kind of falling down, and he goes backward, and he just lands a lucky punch, hits the guy right on the jaw, and just drops him to the ground.
Yeah, you know what's crazy about that one, Scott?
Yeah, what's that?
The guy that lost, the guy who got knocked out with what you call a lucky punch, I fought him in mixed martial arts. He beat me in MMA.
Oh, yeah, he was killing the guy.
He was killing him. He was absolutely – I only saw the replays. He was absolutely wrecking the dude, but, you know, you got to fight till the very end. He also hadn't fought in 10 years. Stupid thing to jump back in when you're off for that time, but it's neither here nor there. I heard you talking about it, and I was like, all right, Scott Mitchell, combat sports fan. I love this.
Well, and it was funny. I went with Mark Wilson, like two of the most unlikely people to go to this, and we're sitting basically ringside, and we're bring on more blood. It was pretty compelling. I was entertained.
All right. That's what it's for. I'm glad you had some fun with it. I know we're going to talk some football here, but I know that you're a Jazz follower just like anyone else in this market is, and they've got a big moment. How big, like when we compare this to the other moments that the Utah Jazz have experienced as a franchise in history, and I made people take the business side out of it, right? Like, not the Jazz being purchased and brought to Salt Lake, not the Jazz changing ownership to the Smith Entertainment Group, whatever, but like actual on-court or in the personnel type stuff. How big is tonight potentially for the Utah Jazz if you were going to rank it?
Wow. Of course, the bigness all determines where they end up and who they get, you know, so if all of those things fall into place, even if it's not, like, let's say they end up at 2 or 3, and they find that player that turns out to be this foundational piece to multiple championships, then tonight's the biggest night in Utah Jazz history. End of discussion. Every Utah Jazz fan will tell you the one thing we all want is a championship. We want to be champs, and we want that parade. And so if this draft is the key component to that happening, no question, it's huge. My paranoia, Sean, and that's the problem as a fan, is you are paranoid, you're jaded, and you always think the worst. It's like, okay, we can't pick worse than 5, but whoever we pick, let's just make a good pick, right? And that's all you want at the end. But the secret, though, or if everyone was being honest, we want to pick number 1. I do. I'm afraid to say it. I mean, I know I've just said it, and I said it on my show, because we're afraid that we're going to be disappointed if we're not number 1. But, man, would that just be the coolest thing in the world if the Utah Jazz have the first pick in the NBA draft and the guy turns out to be a legendary player?
We're keeping our fingers crossed for that. Again, we'll have full coverage right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. The draft lottery will be happening in the final hour of the drive with Spence Checketts, so make sure you're here with us for that. So I know that preseason, way too early predictions, all that stuff is only worth the paper it's printed on, and we don't even print things on paper very often anymore. But Utah has found itself for years and years. The Utes and Kyle Whittingham's teams for several years now, for a decade, have been like preseason respected, if that's the right way to put it. People have high expectations. And it looks like heading into this year, those expectations have been tempered and maybe not quite as high. I'm looking at ESPN. I've seen it on SI. BYU for ESPN is the highest ranked team in the way too early preseason in the Big 12 Conference, coming in at number 10. They've got Arizona State at number 12, Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech. I mean, it's not like the Big 12 is not being represented here. It's just that the Utah Utes are not the team that everyone's focused on right now. How should we feel about that as supporters of Utah, as the home of the Utes? And if you're a Utah fan, how should you feel about that right now?
Well, first off, I don't think they should rank any team in the Big 12 until like maybe week 5 or 6, because the conference, I feel, is talent-wise, it's balanced from top to bottom. Maybe maybe the lower 4 teams, maybe they're not very good, but the rest of the conference, I think it's anyone's game. And in order for that to happen, you have to have your quarterback play and play well. You have to play a reasonable amount of defense, and you have to get lucky. You can't get guys hurt. You have to get turnovers, and you kind of look. That was kind of the blueprint for BYU a year ago, in where they were. It was kind of the blueprint for Arizona State, Iowa State, some of these teams that played well. And if you don't have that, if you get injuries, the quarterback doesn't play well, then you're going to fall off a cliff. And no team has the dominant, just athletic prowess over everyone else, or the depth, quite frankly, that everyone else has had in the past. And so, for Utah to do well, they've got to stay healthy. I mean, on paper, if I'm looking at Utah, I'm like, this is a team. I think they're going to play very well on defense. I think they're going to play a lot better on offense. I'm not sure that they have a wide receiver at this point. I really don't, and that scares the heck out of me. I hope somebody emerges, but you have a quarterback that's very dynamic, and he can make a lot of stuff happen with his playmaking ability, and that's huge. That is huge. It's what got Utah to win 2 Pac-12 championships. It's what got Utah to 2 Rose Bowls, was a quarterback who was dynamic. And then when he got injured, the team was terrible. So, it's all about getting lucky, and I don't see a team in the conference that just stands head and shoulders. You could argue that Texas Tech maybe went out and did a heck of a job in the NIL program, but does that all materialize? And when does it, do these guys gel in time to win a championship? I don't know. The thing I do like, though, is I actually like when Utah's the underdog. I like that Kyle Whittingham kind of is at his best when it's kind of back against the wall. It's us against the world, and it's a place that he's familiar with, and he's had a lot of success from. So I'm pretty excited, and from everything I've seen from him, he's pretty jazzed up. Like, he's fired up about this season and this team, and like it was a lively, very energized team practicing this spring at the University of Utah.
Scott Mitchell, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking all things college football, Utah Utes. I've seen you talk. I've heard you talk about it. I've talked about it on air, behind the scenes, the conversation about, the arms race with NIL. And there was some sentiment among people that, like, the House settlement is really going to settle things down. And it's going to make it a little bit easier to know where you stand, and that $20 million is going to be very helpful coming from the athletic department to athletes and all that. And it's been delayed. And we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. These decisions have to be made sooner than later from a personnel standpoint. Coaches can no longer see new guys in the transfer portal, but they're still going to have to figure out how they can distribute funds amongst the teams that they've got, and if there's talent in the transfer portal right now, what they can deploy in order to bring appealing players into the program, stuff like that. How much do you think this delay in an official final decision on the House settlement is going to affect this year and maybe beyond in college football?
Well, the issue is how many players you can have. I mean, the judge has said, I don't think you can limit that. I think you've got to go back to a larger number. These players that were here grandfathered in, and I would hope, because the other side of this, if it goes to trial, if it doesn't go through, if the agreement falls apart, that's a nightmare. That's a nightmare for everyone, and it could have crazy impacts on so much if it goes through. So I would, if I'm a betting man, I think it happens. But it also, you need to, what happens if you're a team like Utah? They were very clear about it. They said spring football, the spring game is a tryout. This is like the NFL preseason, and we have to make cuts after this is over. And so what if you make those cuts and you let guys go, and then all of a sudden they say, well, you can bring guys back? It's like, well, what if that guy went somewhere else? I mean, you may lose out on some players that were hard decisions you'd like to have in your program, and maybe they develop into something. So to me, it's like, when do you make those decisions to cut people? When do you make decisions to have people around? Because you have to have those decisions in place. And things are a little different with how they do the summer. Like before, it was like, we will see you, like you're gone, in June, and now they have June, July, where they're working with the players because they've been given more time to have on-field stuff, at least walkthrough-ish type practices. So everyone's gone now in May, and then they come back, and if you can't bring guys back, if you can't have that coaching time with them, because every rep with NIL matters more than at any time in college football. Like every opportunity you have to teach, to implement, to get guys familiar with your system, because there's so many new guys, they're just precious, valuable reps. And if you're not sure who's going to be there, and you don't have, and you lose out on those reps, and that really hurts your ability to be a more dynamic team, and you can do more with your offense. This decision could have significant impacts on the teaching and the development of teams with all the movement that goes around.
Who is the best player that you ever were around or played with or know that you would not want to hear talk about football? Michael Jordan is coming back he's going to do some broadcasting with NBC. I'm sure you saw this announcement. And, we've got unbelievable Hall of Fame level great players that are good at analyzing the game, and then some of them that are great players but don't do a wonderful job talking about the game. Who's the best player you were around that you were just like, yeah, you were a great player, but you actually don't know football that well, or you can't convey what you know about football that well?
Here's the guy. So Marino really surprised me. And he surprised me from the standpoint of, if you talk to him, like he's amazing with his football insight. But when he was on air, he's not a stiff person at all. And he's very intelligent, and his football IQ off the charts, scary. And I never heard that when he broadcast. So, but he was an amazing talent. I mean, he was incredible. And then there was Ray Lewis, Ray has done broadcasting, and I still don't understand what he's saying when he broadcasts. He would get up in front of the team the night before the games, and he would give a fired up speech to the team in the hotel. And I, to this day, I don't understand two of the words he said, when he would give this speech. He's famous for his kind of on the field, that whole rah-rah thing that, he would do before games. But in the hotel, he gives this speech, and I would sit next to Tony Saragusa, and I literally have to cover my face because Tony would be giving his interpretation of what he thought Ray was saying, and we still don't know what he was saying. And Tony Saragusa's rendition was far better than anything Ray Lewis could have said. But I had to cover my face because I was just dying laughing so hard at this whole conversation. And Ray, an incredible player, but certainly I would probably say Ray Lewis. Now I'll tell you a guy that would be phenomenal to hear, who would be really good, and that is Steve DeBerg.
Oh, interesting.
Steve DeBerg might be the most intelligent football player I've ever been around. Like he was so into every detail of every last thing, and he knew where the seventh option was. He knew football, and he knew every last little thing that every defense was doing, and every he was incredible. Having that as someone to share knowledge with would be a priceless treasure, and it's unfortunate that someone has never had him do it because he is a brilliant human being.
That's interesting. We could do that all day. Just the guys we wanted to hear from, and maybe sometime on the ones that you don't.
So right, Tom Brady. I'm like, okay, and I haven't heard it from Tom Brady yet. It's because Tom Brady has to have this wealth of knowledge of things, and he got better as the season went along and whatever, but a little bit, a little stiff, a little, and it's not easy to do for anyone, but and because I want to hear what Tom Brady has to say, because no one's had an experience in professional football like Tom Brady, no one. And so he has experience, he has an insight that I would love to hear about. And I'd actually tune in, and I did tune into games he did just for that reason. And he got better as the season went on, and hopefully he'll get better as he continues with it because he knows like nobody else.
Will you be intrigued in tuning in when Michael Jordan is doing the analysis? Do you think he's going to be good?
I will absolutely turn into Michael Jordan. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, no one's had that experience as an athlete, and you hope that he can convey what that is. And and I don't know, because Michael Jordan, if you've watched, Michael Jordan's a savage. Like Michael Jordan is calculated, like he's smart, he's intelligent. Nothing is done by chance with him. Like he was very very astute in everything he did, and you have to believe that that's the same way he's going to be now. I absolutely would tune into Michael Jordan, and for me, I like to joke. I hate Michael Jordan because he pushed off on Brian Russell, but I have, as a sports fan, just the utmost respect for Michael Jordan, and always been a huge fan of Michael Jordan.
Scott, it's always great catching up with you. Thanks for joining me on the show today. More importantly, thanks for holding it down Thursday and Friday last week. I don't have to go anywhere again for a while, so you're just going to have to do your own show for the next few weeks, all right?
I'll try to figure that out. It's always a pleasure, and I'm always happy to help out, Sean, so thank you.
That's Scott Mitchell, Utah football legend. Host of the Down and Dirty right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Lots left to get to, including more looks at this upcoming NBA draft lottery. Andrea Urban is going to be joining us next. We'll see what her level of stition is. Superstitious, just a little stitious. Are we getting lucky tonight, Jazz fans? We'll find out in like 4.5 hours. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.
The Utah Jazz is very proud to select Darrell Griffith, 6'4". Fans, we're real happy with this selection. You know, our feeling was that we were just very anxious to get a quality basketball player here.
That is Sam Battistone, the former Utah Jazz owner, and Frank Layden talking about how excited they are about selecting Darrell Griffith, number 2 overall, 1980. Wow, it's so long ago. Crazy how long ago that was. That sound courtesy of the Utah Jazz and the NBA. That's the highest draft pick in franchise history. And as you all know, the Jazz have the highest odds, the best odds for picking number 1 in the upcoming draft. But we will find out with the NBA draft lottery tonight. It's at 5. We'll have full coverage for you here on ESPN 700. The Drive with Spence Checketts. We'll be talking about it today, tomorrow, etc. Andrea Urban is also leaning into the coverage on this NBA draft lottery. She joins us now to talk about all things Utah Jazz. Andrea, how are you?
Hey, good afternoon. I was going to say good morning. It's good to be here. And, man, I've got all my fingers, toes crossed because we need the ping pong ball to drop the Utah Jazz way, just for our morality, really.
So here's the deal. I am a conspiracy theorist by nature, and I am skeptical that if there is any level of control that the NBA wants Cooper Flagg in Salt Lake City. James has done a great job over the weeks of kind of like pushing back and saying, first of all, there's not any control. And even if there was, why would they say that Orlando Magic or the Minnesota Timberwolves are more important than Salt Lake City or than the Utah Jazz? Where do you fall on the spectrum, Andrea?
Oh, my goodness. Well, first, in 51 seasons of Jazz basketball, there's never been a number 1, which we know that, but that just seems to be the Utah luck. But then you look at what Utah Hockey Club, now Mammoth, was able to do, jump in 10 spots, so I'm hoping we can bring that juju along. My heart says that we're going to draw a 2 spot and then have to trade the lot for the 1 spot, just because how am I supposed to sit here and really be like, yeah, of course we're going to get the 1. I'm going to keep the positive energy going, though, and say, like, we're going to be up top because I like the 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, anything below that, in my opinion, is just not going to cut it to save / help this Utah Jazz organization, and so I say it's Cooper Flagg or die. But if not, I'm okay with both of the Rutgers guys at 2 and 3. But I think we need a generational player, and that's Cooper Flagg.
So you mentioned something interesting in there. You know, if you draw something lower, you're going to have to try to trade up. Do you think that's even possible, or like? Whoever ends up with the number 1 overall pick, in my opinion, is grabbing Cooper Flagg. I don't think, unless it's some freakish happenstance like we had in the NHL draft lottery. You just referenced how high the Utah Mammoth climbed. Well, the same thing happened. It was the team that was supposed to pick 10 ended up picking number 1. So I think that at the top of this NBA draft, the need is so great for everyone in the Jazz kind of same neighborhood that they got to pick Cooper Flagg. Do you think it's possible to trade up, to trade back into that number 1 spot? Because there is some draft capital. The Jazz do have assets.
Yes, and that's exactly where I was going with it, because Justin Zanuck at their end-of-season media availability was just so clear on we have the pieces and like you said, the capital to make moves, and I'm not afraid. We're not afraid to do so. So a part of me wonders, all of these question marks where we've traded away guys in the middle of the season once they became like a vibe, and the culture guys like Mike Conley's and so on that we get rid of, and Malik Beasley's who's found, his rhythm in Detroit, and then you pass on these guys to build a repertoire, and I think this is one of those examples where, Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck are sitting back going, we have the ability to do so. Now, who's going to take that? Who's going to move on from a generational player like a Cooper Flagg? I don't know what everybody's looking for, but there's a part of me that really does think that the Jazz have the lot of things that they can turn in to make this happen. But let's just plan for us to get number one no matter what. Let's just plan for that. How about?
Okay, so give me the vibe around the building, the players that you've been able to be near, the coaching staff, the concessions, whatever. This is a nerve-wracking time. Yes, it's on the positive side of the ledger. It's exciting because you could see Jazz come up at number one. And even if they end up 2, 3, I'm with you. I think that getting somebody like a Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey or whomever else, I think that really helps this franchise. But give me the overall mood around the team and around the organization right now, as far as you can tell.
Right. It's such an interesting time because following such a losing season, you see this massive contract extension for head coach Will Hardy, which shows belief and shows that they like what he's up to, or at least where his basketball knowledge is in building this organization. And then it's funny because I saw Jordan Clarkson at the Bees game, and he was all like, yeah, I'm excited that the young guys are growing, and hopefully we can start winning as they grow. And I'm just like, is that how we're feeling? Because I know losing night after night gets really tiring. There's optimism. There's also, like, I even reached out to some, Jazz Nation, the fan page and stuff, and some fans, and everyone's like, no, we're staying home and watching this on our phone because we just don't want to be publicly, disappointed. So the fans are really nervous, from my understanding. The fans are like, we're Utah, this kind of stuff happens. And then I see Justin Zanuck and I see, those guys in the front office ready to rock. I could see them ready to go. And then the players kind of keep sharing that they understand the young energy and that as long as everyone gets better. But I also do think extending Will Hardy through 2031 says a lot. I think that says a lot to who you're drafting, that they're investing in what's going on at this organization. Plus, you see all the changes that are going on within Smith Entertainment Group. And I think if you're a player about to go in the NBA draft, I think you want to be a part of a place like the Jazz where you do see new arena and you do see new branding and new jerseys. It's only going to make you want to be a part of this place. And so I think if you're 1, 2, or 3, despite the losing record, you see the stability in their head coach. I think that getting picked by the Utah Jazz is not a situation. I think this is exciting, and that you could be the guy for this place, essentially like a Donovan Mitchell, which we didn't know he could be what he was. But I love that there's an opportunity here for someone to really be the star. And I hope the players see that too. So those are the vibes I'm feeling through each person. It's funny that everyone, it's so different. The fans are hiding away while we've got some confidence on the front office side.
Well, it's interesting because you brought up the Will Hardy extension, right? 2031 indicates to me that there is that's a gesture of patience. That's saying, you know what? We know that we've asked you to do something that is probably not fun and tanking, and we believe that you're the right coach for the future of this franchise. But 2031 is 6 years away, which means I think that there's, they're in for the long game here, and that's probably the right way to be. Fans are less rational. Will this Jazz fan base, who's been so loyal for so long and through so many difficult times, will the Jazz fans share that patient approach? Or are we going to start to get a little bit antsy, especially with the high draft odds, and especially if you can get somebody like Cooper Flagg that, hey, we need results in 2027, 2028. Right. People aren't going to wait till 2031, Andrea.
No, and I agree. And that's kind of what the vibe I've been getting as well from this fan base is if we don't get this number one, then we as a fan base expect a redirection and a replanning in the Utah Jazz front office because it's just not going to work if we just keep being this 17-win team. I mean, some of those losses were so brutal. Like, and I'm not just saying 20-point losses. There's 30, 40-point losses. And when you're an in-arena host trying to hype up a crowd when you're down by 20, it's really demoralizing, and you can feel that in the room, and you can also feel that slight belief, that slight, it's okay, we're gonna have something that's going to be great at some point. And Will Hardy keeps saying it, I'm prioritizing a banner in the Delta Center. So he said, just hang on, it's going to be worth it. Now, that's hard to say to paying Jazz fans who watch a team lose by 20, but a part of me also really believes it, which I might be drinking the Kool-Aid, I'm not sure, but whenever I hear Will Hardy talk, I'm also like, yes, coach, I agree. Like, thank you. I see what you're saying, and he owns it. What I do like about head coach Will Hardy is that when he takes the podium, he doesn't try to fluff around like, oh, well, you know, we're still – he admittedly will be like, yep, we didn't get back on defense. Like, there's no effort. Like, we're making it about ourselves. It's not me, it's our team. Like, he will say those things, and that's why I do have so much respect for him, and I also do understand a 2031 extension. Now, that's a huge, but I do get it.
On the other side of the Smith Entertainment Group world is the Utah Mammoth. Love the name, love the release, love the logos, all of it. We haven't had a chance to catch up since it became official. Wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I love it. I've been Team Mammoth from the beginning. For me, I think of like marketing. I think of legacy in Utah, and you look at the state of Utah and just the history of Mammoth. I guess there's like one of the largest mammoths in Fairview, Utah, stuffed and on display and when in like the nation or something like that, which is amazing. And then I love the tribute to the mountains and the state logo within the logo. And I think if we're wearing something on our hats and on our jerseys, and I want it to have a deeper meaning. Obviously, Yeti, Utah Yeti, like that play on words is really nice too. But I think with the whole one team, Mammoth, singular, I really like it. And I see the fans now in their Mammoth onesie outfits and the tusks up. Like, this is so marketable, and I am all about it. And plus, there's a Mammoth emoji, so if you want to tweet, you got that too.
Did you see on the Pat McAfee show the hand gesture they were doing for tusks up? Did you see this?
I did.
Are we going to use that? Are we adopting that, or are we saying no, that's too involved?
Well, at the release announcement when they opened the doors for fans to go shopping, I saw people doing like a rock and roll sign, but then holding it at their nose. And then other fans were doing a one-handed thumb to nose, pinky up, and had just a one-handed. And then on Pat McAfee's show, I'm seeing the two hands. Someone in this fan base is going to have to take charge here in what the heck we're doing, because the message is not clear. I actually like the thumb to nose, pinky up better than the rock and roll, because I just feel like that takes me to like Texas Longhorns. I don't want. If we're really going to create a brand new entity, mascot, organization, all of it, let's just be completely different.
Yeah, you know what? The more I think about it too, you can't, if you do it the McAfee show way, the thumb, and it's kind of like the hang loose, it's the shaka. You can't really do a tusk. You can't do a tusks down. It doesn't really work. So
yeah, right. Well, and Ryan Smith did say, and I know that this is a youth-friendly show here, but Ryan Smith did say, I bet you never thought you'd see a U in blue.
Okay, see, now we're going to end the interview. Now, this is the home of the Utes, Andrea.
No, I know, but you guys cover the Utes, and you're and also Cam Rising. Wow, what a time, too, to just be a part of, to be covering college football as well in this state. But when Ryan Smith ended the interview last week with us and said, never thought you'd see a U in blue, I just was like, oh no, some fans are going to hate that.
You know what? It was the only shade of blue that BYU hadn't tried to steal and use. So I think we're safe. I got to keep you one more question because you just mentioned it. Cam Rising did officially announce his medical retirement from football. I think we had all kind of come to grips with the idea that he was not coming back to play for the university. But how will you remember the Cam Rising era of Utah football?
Oh my goodness, just an absolutely historic time. I reached out to him and I wrote him and just said, like, hey man, I loved working with you. I loved learning from you, just from covering him as this athlete that had grown within the organization and truly proved himself and then became the hero in that 21-22 era. The win in the LA Coliseum for the first time in program history, back-to-back Pac-12 championships. Like, it's heartbreaking to see Cam Rising go out on this note, but there's just no doubt, like, Utah Utes fans cannot be upset with Cam Rising. I know how the secrets with the Brent and the injuries and the Cam injuries, that's disappointing how that was handled, but if you can take a step back from maybe the journey to this point and just really take a look at what Cam Rising did, he inspired a city, he inspired a fan base, and he inspired that program to go out there and do what they did. And I felt it every single time I went to practice and media availability. And so I just let him know it was a pleasure working with him, and whatever he does next, good luck to him. And I know that I understand that he's going to go work as an offensive coordinator at his high school, but I want Cam Rising on my team, that's for sure.
Andrea, you're the best. Enjoy the rest of this afternoon / early evening and the draft lottery, and we'll talk again soon.
Oh, yeah. Fingers, toes crossed. Okay, Sean?
How many of you out there can actually cross your toes? I can. James, you can do the double finger cross, right? I mean, that's normal dexterity.
Yeah, I've got that. I kind of have to.
You have to help yourself?
I have to help myself with both hands there.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe I have too fat of fingers. I don't know.
James, you can't cross ring finger and pinky without adjusting, without helping? Oh, man.
I cannot.
That's.
I can't even put my ring finger. I can't even keep my pinky up if my ring finger's down. Do you see that?
Really?
It tilts.
James, you got some weird stuff going on.
Yes.
Can you cross your toes?
No.
Don't take your shoes and socks off to find out. Never mind. Big thanks to Andrea Urban. Live Night Events presents the 2025 Granary Live Concert Series powered by Nightingale College and Murdoch Hyundai, Utah's #1 Hyundai dealer. Outdoor concerts in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City's Granary District. Details are available right now at ESPN700sports.com. Josh Furlong's going to join us at 1. We got a lot to talk about with Josh Furlong. We'll cover everything we've discussed so far today. I want to get back to some of the hockey conversation that we had and some of the hockey conversation we didn't have with this new branding announced by the Utah Hockey Club, now officially the Utah Mammoth. Sean O'Connell Show on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Josh Furlong joining us in about 10 minutes here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Utah Jazz hoping for a number 1 overall pick tonight as a result of the upcoming NBA draft lottery. The odds are against it. 86% chance you don't get number 1. The most likely pick statistically is also the worst case scenario. It's number 5. We're hoping for better things than that. I'm trying to take a page out of James Peterson's book and be more optimistic. The Utah Hockey Club, now the Utah Mammoth, they moved up. They jumped the maximum number of spots. They were as lucky as you could possibly be. And now it just feels like, well, yeah, of course. Of course that was always going to happen. This franchise is destined for great things. The Utah Jazz have never picked number 1 overall. The best pick, the highest pick, number 2 in 1980. They picked 3 a few times. Sometimes it's worked out. Most times it hasn't. Number 1 this year will be Cooper Flagg. James Peterson. If you don't get number 1, can you even move into the number 1 spot?
Absolutely the hell not.
No one's going to give up.
It's Cooper Flagg.
For your number 1 overall pick, which let's say is number 3.
No.
For next year's number 1, for the other first-round pick you've got, which is the Minnesota Timberwolves pick, you got 2 in the second round, right?
It doesn't. You could have every first-round pick from here until the end of time. No team is giving up on a chance to take a generational player like Cooper Flagg. It's not happening. So
that's where I that's where I think it's at. Now let me ask you this: you're not going to be able to move up to number 1, but let's say number 5 is where you draw.
Okay.
Can you move to number 2? For Dylan Harper?
See, that's a maybe. I still think it's very unlikely because Dylan Harper is looked at as also maybe not as generational, maybe not as surefire as a generational talent as
Take Cooper Flagg out of this draft. Cooper Flagg decides he's going to go play for the Shanghai Sharks. Yeah. Okay?
I don't need the NBA.
Is Dylan Harper now as coveted, nearly as coveted?
I don't think he is. He certainly would be the number 1 pick, and he would definitely have been the number 1 pick last year. He probably isn't the number 1 pick over a guy like AJ Debonsa next year, but that tells you most years a guy like Dylan Harper is the number 1 overall pick. So I still think it's unlikely that a team would say, you know what, we don't want a guy who could be a generational point guard. Even if it's not as sure a thing as Cooper Flagg seems to be as a future star. But it's certainly more likely than trading for number 1. I think that the highest they could realistically hope to trade into if they want to move up is to number 3, and I'm not sure they would care. I'm not sure teams are going to be falling over themselves for the chance to draft Ace Bailey if Ace Bailey is the consensus number 3 guy, which as we get closer to the draft, as tends to happen, you start to hear all the varying opinions on. I mean, before the college basketball season, it was like, yeah, Ace Bailey's, if he's not number 2, he's number 3. Now it seems to be a lot of people like VJ Edgecombe there, a lot of people like Trey Johnson there, a lot of people still like Ace Bailey there. So I think if the Jazz don't get 1 or 2, you might as well don't turn your nose up at a top 5 pick. Like, you still can get really good talent, Trey Johnson, VJ Edgecombe, someone else. If it's not Dylan Harper or Cooper Flagg, just take the pick.
Okay, so I put a survey out. I put a poll question out about exactly that, talking contingency plans. If the Utah Jazz don't get number 1, draft where you land, try to trade up, or abandon all hope. You're going draft where you land.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't. Oh, they didn't get number 1. Now they're number 13. This is still top 5. Like, take the top 5 pick.
And I think it bears stating that the Jazz are not a player away from being a playoff winning great franchise, right? So
They're probably tanking again next year, even if they get Cooper Flagg.
Let's say you don't get him and you end up with Ace Bailey, right? High hopes, wonderful things could happen there. You probably need him and whatever that Minnesota Timberwolves pick yields.
Yeah.
You probably need even more than that. You probably need Cooper Flagg and whatever
top
else.
5 pick next year, which is a loaded draft next year, probably even more loaded than this one, beyond number 1 pick.
Also, here's another thing: if you're not going to have the number 1 pick this year, they've already showed us, all right, we're willing to tank. They'll do it again next year, and I promise you, Ryan Smith wants AJ DeBonsa just as much as he wants Cooper Flagg.
Yes,
because that BYU to Jazz pipeline is exactly what he's trying to build.
That's the dream for Ryan Smith, and probably Danny Ainge too, if you gave him some truth serum.
Interesting times are afoot with the sports world here in Salt Lake City.
Veritas serum for the Harry Potter fans out there.
I like that. Okay.
No, I respect. I have a ton of respect for Andrea Urban. I respect her perspective on this, but when she started to say maybe they can package to trade for number 1, I'm like, you're out of your mind.
I think
no one
you could
can
maybe
do that.
move to number 2 if you were
maybe
hyper aggressive.
I think you'd have to.
I don't think that anybody in their right mind or anybody. I just don't think it's possible that you're going to draft Cooper Flagg unless things go your way tonight.
Yeah, and to be clear, Andrea is not the only one who said that. There's tons of people that still hold out hope that, hey, look at all this draft capital. You're going to have to include probably both of Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler if you think you're going to do that, plus a bunch of draft capital. And at that point, you're worse off than you were this year.
So let's just go through the teams that could end up with that number 1 overall pick, right? So are the Charlotte Hornets going to draft or going to trade out of that spot and prevent a guy who's already in Carolinas from playing in Carolina as a pro? No, they're going to say kick rocks. The Washington Wizards going to say, yes, let's trade.
Washington's been searching for a star since John Wall tripped in his kitchen and tore up his leg. And they had to trade him to Houston. Like this.
Are the New Orleans Pelicans? That might be the only team, honestly. If the Pelicans got number 1, now it could go either way. I think the Pelicans might look internally and say, we already did this number 1 thing, and we put too many eggs in the basket of that one guy, and it didn't work out for us. So let's get a haul here. Let's get this year, next year, 2. But even then, it just feels hyper unlikely.
I really don't see that happening either, because you don't have to say you don't have to unload Zion Williamson to add Cooper Flagg, because it's like young quarterback in the NFL now that you get a rookie scale contract. It's going to fit within your cap for 3 to 5 years.
Are the Philadelphia 76ers going to pass up on the chance, even if you offer them a lot, to draft Cooper Flagg? No. Are the Brooklyn Nets going to do that? No. Are the Toronto Raptors going to say, hey, yeah, we'll take 6 picks in exchange for this number 1 pick? No. And are the San Antonio Spurs going to pass up the opportunity of teaming Cooper Flagg and Victor Wembanyama up if somehow they get
with
lucky
De'Aaron
enough?
Fox, by the way? Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Just
keep your fingers crossed. Yeah. Throw the salt over your shoulder. Whatever you think is the best superstition, go with that. The Utah Jazz need the number 1 pick if they want to see Cooper Flagg. And by the way, if Cooper Flagg ends up in Utah, spectacular on paper, should be fun, should be incredible, should be a cool moment. He becomes the number 1 selling jersey instantaneously. But like we have said many different ways, many different times, he still needs more help. All right, got to take a quick one here. We come back with Josh Furlong. Lots to talk about with Josh Furlong. Obviously, we'll discuss the retirement of Cam Rising, this draft lottery that's coming up, get into some Utah Mammoth. That's next on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network.
In the left slot. 4th and half a yard here. Now SC backs the safety out a little bit. 7 yard here. Now SC backs the safety out a little bit. 7 in the box. 4th and half a yard. Cubby in motion. Handoff. Nope. Play action. Flea flicker. Down the middle. He's got a man open in the end zone. Caught! Touchdown! Touchdown! Touchdown, Devon Bailey! They use the flea flicker for 6 and a Utah touchdown!
Oh, better days. That was a Cam Rising flea flicker, USC 2021. That sound courtesy of the Utah Sports Radio Network. First win in the Coliseum since 1916. Cam Rising obviously announced his retirement from football last week, medically retired. Josh Furlong has been covering the Utes for a long time. He's the sports director over at KSL, and he joins us now to talk all things Utah sports. Josh, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, LC?
I'm doing all right. I know that you've probably been asked 100 times about it, but not by me. Cam Rising's announcement that it's official. He's done. Medically, he is retiring from football. How will we look back? How will you look back on the Cam Rising era of the Utes?
Yeah, I think you have to look at it with a lot of positivity. I know it didn't end the best for Rising or for Utah, and it's unfortunate that his career ends on a terrible road game that he kind of felt the pressure to play in. But I think when you look back and take a step back at who he was and what he did for the program, I mean, he brought Utah to some new heights that, they never knew were possible in a lot of ways, right? Like, obviously you had the Sugar Bowl and you had other big moments in Utah history. But I think with the consistency and what he was able to do and just kind of the optimism about who Utah could be, it really kind of changed Utah football. And a lot of kind of the legacy that Kyle Whittingham's going to have is going to be tied to Cam Rising as well. So I think there's a lot of positivity that needs to come from him. He obviously brings Utah 2 Pac-12 championships, a lot of fantastic moments. I mean, the one that you just played there with that flea flicker was pretty incredible. But I think it's just, he's a guy with a lot of moxie. He'd love to be able to be a part of a team, wanted to kind of compete at a high level. And unfortunately, it ended in a way that it did. But I think he's a phenomenal competitor. And I think Utah fans owe him a lot of their fandom credit because he really brought Utah football on the map.
I think at some point we see his name on the side of the stadium, like Alex Smith's is already up there. It won't be. We're not going to do the Colorado thing and like Shedeur Sanders this, but when? Like when's enough time passed and maybe let the sting come off this thing?
That's a good question because I think the way it currently stands, like he probably doesn't fit the model of what they wanted with the Ring of Honor and stuff like that. But I think you have to kind of evolve and you have to look at that and say, okay, what does he mean to the program in general, right? Utah football's obviously had a lot of great players coming in along, and I think trying to put him in there before some of these others is going to be tough, right? And I think each has their own claim to fame. Obviously, Alex Smith is a great first one to be able to have. I mean, you could put a whole host of players up there, but the impacts that they had on the program, I think that's what really gives Rising kind of that next level, right? Like, obviously, he was close to breaking school records if he would have played the last season. He was right there. It would have been his for the taking. He brought Utah 2 Pac-12 championships, as we mentioned, obviously. But I think, you're going to have to look at his era as one that really cemented Utah as a true Power 5 competitor, that they went from this team that they're always going to be good, they're always in the mix, to a team that is going to be respected and is always going to be in the mix in terms of being at the top echelon of college football. And now, you look, they're not Alabama, they're not Ohio State or anything like that. But I think what he was able to do is show that Utah can do it and that they can do it at a consistent level. And I think if Utah can continue to do that at a consistent level, you 100% have him to thank. And so I think some of the kind of criteria to put him in kind of needs to go out the window because of what he did to put Utah on the right trajectory.
Speaking of being in the top 25, the way too earlys are out, and you are a top 25 voter. I don't know if you're a way too early top 25 voter, if that's the way that they make you do it. But Utah has been in this conversation, I mean, every year for the last however many years. at least as the others also receiving votes. And it seems like a lot of the attention right now is on other teams in the conference, including BYU. I don't hate that, honestly, because having bulletin board material and being the underdog and all that is a little bit of a different focus point than being the hunted rather than the hunters. What do you think of the, I guess, reputation for Utah football right now as the season approaches? We're just over 100 days away.
Yeah, I think the reputation's still well for Utah. I think it's more there's not going to be a lot of optimism in terms of a top 25 team right now. But they're a type of team that they've been consistent enough that if things start to go well, they're going to get early looks because of who they have been and kind of, especially if the voters look at it and say, we understand where Utah was these last 2 years with injuries and whatever it may be, that, we'll give them a chance here, right? I know Kyle Whittingham loves the, underdog mentality, and he loves to be able to move forward with that and use that as, like you said, locker room material or whatever it may be. But I think Utah's kind of evolved to the point where they need to stop worrying about being the underdog, right? Like, obviously this season, nobody's expecting them to be in the top 25. I think there's still an outside shot as a Big 12 title contender. At least most would see it that way. But I think once you can get back to there, you've got to be able to be the ones that accept being hunted, right? If Utah truly wants to be where the program sees it, right? Like they clearly want to have higher aspirations, be a part of whatever the Power 2 is or whatever the next iteration of college football is, Utah wants to be there. And the only way to do that is to be at the top. And so, take it for what it is this year, be the underdog, surprise people, come in and do what you can in the Big 12 if that's what works out for you. But I think they need to move on. There needs to be an evolution in terms of kind of how the program views itself as well as the fans view itself, that they have to say, we've arrived, right? Maybe not to the level as some of those other big programs that I've talked about, but I think you have to evolve and you have to say, okay, like, look, this is the expectations we have for ourselves. It's playoffs or bust. We're going to be the best team in the Big 12. Those are kind of those expectations you have to have and live with it, right? And then find ways to be able to continue to excel and grow. That's what has made Utah successful, is always being the underdog. But I think they've now evolved into that level where in the Big 12, you have all the potential to be at the top if you continue to make the progress that you need. And I think there needs to be kind of steps to make that so that it is entrenched and it is something that Utah truly believes in themselves.
Josh Furlong's our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking all things Utah athletics. Unfortunate announcement for Utah Beach Volleyball that program has been shuttered, and you don't see it at the Power 4 level. You haven't seen it with revenue-producing sports just yet, but there are going to be some executive decisions that have to be made on whether or not you can field every team as a scholarship, non-club type operation with revenue sharing coming and all that stuff. What ultimately made the decision for the university that beach volleyball had to go away?
Yeah, a lot of people are going to look at this and say, "Oh, it's Utah preparing for, having to pay athletes and that kind of stuff." And from my conversations, that hasn't been the case. I'm sure there's aspects of that. I think it just, for them, they didn't feel like it fit their profile anymore. Moving from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, yeah, there's teams that can compete in the beach volleyball, but it just doesn't fit the profile that they were looking to do. And so to fully invest in something, they wanted to be able to have more. Now, as with everything, there's a lot of nuances, right? I talked to a couple former athletes for beach volleyball that they're frustrated by it, right? Like they feel like the athletic department didn't listen to their concerns and didn't give them the time of the day that they deserve. But at the end of the day, the university has to make a business decision. So, like I said, there's a lot of nuances to it. There's a lot of struggles. There's a lot of frustrations on both ends where, the athletes are going to be hurt that they didn't get their opportunities anymore. But at the end of the day, these athletic departments, whether it's for this new era of paying athletes or not, they have to do what's in their best interest to be able to make sure that things work. Because unlike what many think, a lot of these student funds or these funds are just raised by whatever is brought in. And so if there's something that you feel like you can invest in and it's not something that works, it's a real challenge to try to keep that on your book. So a lot of moving pieces there. There's been offers to be able to make it so that Utah could, compete free using other venues and different things that way. But I think there's challenges there. There's different challenges that come with any of these things. But at the end of the day, it's the university doing what they can to try to compete in all sports and not just try to kind of forget other sports, if that makes sense.
What do you think happens with the now delayed settlement ruling by the judge, roster limits being the biggest obstacle here? College football rosters right now have walk-ons. They've got 85 scholarship players. And in this House settlement, part of the initial draft was that you have to impose roster limits, and then the assumption would be everybody on that roster, whether it's 95 players, 105 players, whatever, everyone's a scholarship athlete after that. The transfer portal, a lot of the 3,000 people entered the transfer portal post-spring anticipating this ruling was coming down, and still it's not official. What do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still time in the sense that they have to have it done by July 1st. And most universities, if not all, have been preparing for that date. So I don't think there's an issue in terms of how long it'll take as long as it gets approved before then. But if it doesn't, that's where the real chaos is going to happen. If we thought the NCAA was chaotic already, this is going to create a whole other level of that, because you're going to have programs that are just going to essentially do what they want. You're going to have some states that have allowed them, the legislatures have allowed them to pay student athletes. Utah had one on the book to be able to make sure that they could get that in case there wasn't a settlement. You're going to have a whole bunch of schools that are just doing whatever they want to try to make sure that they can get the competitive advantage, barring the NCAA forcing or creating some sort of rule that says you have to be under a limit. I don't know that anybody's going to really follow anything, right? I think there was one athletic director that told Yahoo Sports that, what's the NCAA going to do? They haven't been able to have any teeth so far, so what are they going to do if this doesn't happen? So I think in terms of this specifically, it's in the best interest to get this settled so that they can have consistency for what everybody has been preparing for. But this is still just a stopgap. It's not something that's going to be the end solution. There's still a lot of frustrations there. There's a lot of schools that can't generate $20 million every single year to be able to pay their athletes. And so it's going to be a real struggle for a lot of these programs, including Utah, right? Like Utah 100% can be able to invest in this first year, but what's that mean 5 years from now if this continues? Oregon's, Ohio State's, they're going to be okay. But Utah and all these other programs, what's it going to look like if this continues? So I think more clarity is going to be better. I'd be curious to see if Utah ever decides to go the Kentucky route and try to go to an LLC as an athletic department and try to run it as a business, so to speak. There's so many options that it's so hard to predict. But I think, assuming that the House settlement goes through, everything should be fine based on how we've kind of talked about it for the last little bit, because universities have been preparing for it.
How many schools, universities, programs out there can sustain this? You mentioned Texas and Oregon and Ohio State. And when it all comes down, and I think eventually it does, is it 40 schools? Is it 65 schools? How many can play this game in perpetuity?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think, at least based on the numbers that I've looked at from the national perspective, obviously not knowing fully, I would say it's maybe 25 programs. I think there's more losses in athletics than most people would want to admit, even in football, basketball, that kind of stuff. And so, it's great if your football team can subsidize that for a while, but I just don't know how sustainable that is unless you are the Texas, Oregons, Oklahomas, Ohio States, that kind of stuff. And so it becomes a real challenge where teams can't do it, right? Utah is good in terms of what they are able to do. They're able to fund their other departments and move forward, but it's real easy to say that now, knowing that they haven't had to throw out $20 million, right? You're going to get funds from boosters and other people that can help with that. They got a $14 million fund that can help with women's athletics recently, that can kind of add to some of that. But it's just not a viable solution long term unless you can kind of find ways to be able to separate some of these sports. And I just don't know. Like I said, this is kind of more of a stopgap, and I don't know that there's a lot of programs out there that can sustain this long term.
On the Utah Jazz front, this is a huge day, obviously, with the draft lottery coming in now 3.5-ish hours. Where do you stand on your optimism that they end up with pick number 1 and eventually grab Cooper Flagg?
I mean, I think this is one of those things where it's always going to be nobody wants the Jazz to be able to have the number one pick. But I've heard jokes that of course this will be the year because it's a white guy that's going to be there. So maybe there's Lady Luck's on their side or whatever it may be. But I don't know. I mean, I think these things are always funny. It's kind of crazy that a team can tank their entire season just for a chance at 14% at a number one pick. But that's the current era that we're in with basketball. I don't personally love it. I think it's disingenuous. It's not a great model, but at the same time, you kind of have to play the game the way that everybody else is doing it. So I think for Utah fans, obviously, that would be great to be able to have Cooper Flagg, assuming that he is the guy that everybody expects him to be. But I don't know. I think I go into these things as more pessimistic, and then if it happens, great. But maybe that's a bad look. But I think the odds are stacked against him. Let's just say that.
How interested are you in Michael Jordan, basketball analyst?
Ooh, I think it could have its potential, right? Like, I mean, you've seen guys that have really brought some fascinating things to the game, with whether it be Shaquille O'Neal or Chuck or whatever it may be. But like, if he's just going to go on there and just pontificate about certain things, I don't know that it really adds value, right? Like, I think one of the mystiques about Jordan is he played his game. Everybody views him as kind of the GOAT, and they still have that debate. But he kind of went to the background, right? Like, he just kind of lived life without, and obviously he's involved with stuff. But I think that's what adds to the mystique of him. Now, unless he's going to give, like, great insights or stories or different things, I don't know that it really helps. I mean, do we really need Jordan now, 20-ish years later, telling us, how basketball's played? I don't know. But I'm intrigued. I'll say that I'm intrigued, and I think it could be fun, especially if he could bring his own personality to it and not just be a talking head.
I will say this. It proves to me that boredom is undefeated because the man has literally billions of dollars. I mean, the Jordan brand thing, the owning and then selling of an NBA franchise, he's a billionaire. He could be on a yacht. He could golf every minute of his life. You can get bored with anything, and he's obviously bored to the point where he's like, yeah, I'll do a job. That is crazy to me, Josh Furlong, but that's where we're at.
I think it's fun, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what my life will look like in terms of retirement, but I can't imagine just sitting around. And but I'm with you, though. Like, I'd love to just go golfing. I'd love to travel. I'd love to do those types of things. So maybe he's just done it all enough that he's okay taking this on. But I don't know. It's really fascinating to kind of see how they utilize him. I hope it's good. Like, I hope it's not just some way to really use his name that really doesn't benefit everybody, because I think he could provide a lot of value if used correctly.
I want to take it a bit further and let NBC work out the kinks and let him get his reps. And then if you're inside the NBA, slide him in there with Ernie and Shaq and Chuck and poor Kenny, I guess, would be the odd man out there. But I need Michael Jordan.
Though, if he's good, right?
I need Michael Jordan with guys that can make fun of Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? And
exactly.
Most people can't. Shaq kind of can, and Chuck would, because they used to be great friends. I don't know if they still are, but anyway.
Yeah, watching Chuck make fun of Jordan would be a lot of fun. Yeah, that would be entertainment.
Have you purchased any Mammoth stuff yet?
Not yet. My kids are excited to. They had some. I think one of my sons had the Utah Hockey Club hat, so I think everything was just waiting to kind of get to that level. But I think it's fun. I think it's a fun way to kind of represent hockey in the state. So I'm curious to see what it all comes out, and I'm looking forward to kind of the gear that could be there.
Josh, you're the man. Always appreciate hearing from you. Thanks for giving us the time today.
Appreciate it, OC. Have a good one.
Josh Furlong, sports director over at KSL Sports, Utah Insider. Not just for the Utes, but for basically all Utah sports. And he is an AP Top 25 voter. I think we are going to see Utah football climbing like they had to do in the early and mid-2000s. I think by the time the preseason rolls around, like the actual preseason camps roll around, Utah is going to be effectively ranked 30th for people. Also receiving votes, kind of thought of, but not necessarily on anyone's radar firmly. And then I think as the season progresses, you'll see them start 4-0 or whatever, and then they'll be ranked 23. And then they'll end up 6-1 at some point, and they'll be ranked 17 when that happens. I think we're just turning back the clock a little bit on the respect level for Utah football because people have seen what happened the last couple of years, and they're starting to scratch their heads. But optimistic that with the changes the offense has made and with some of the defensive personnel that you're bringing back and some that you've added, it's going to be a good year of Utah football without all of the weight of expectation on the front, and maybe that'll affect things on actual game days. Before we take a break, I want to make sure everyone's aware of a new partnership we have with a client with some friends at ESPN 700 Sports. We were referencing this earlier, actually, James. A lot of people now, as you're fighting the aging thing, you'll find yourself dealing with chronic pain, maybe sleep's harder to come by, bald spots are setting in, your overall health just is not where it needs to be. The Steel Vault is a medical spa right in the middle of the valley, Holiday, Utah. They've got an expert staff that's going to help you with anything from getting rid of wrinkles and crow's feet to improving that sleep cycle. They'll get your hormones back in balance. Maybe you want to lose some weight. They've got it all, man. The Steel Vault as a med spa really gives you an opportunity to go in, get an assessment, figure out what's going on with your body, what's going on with the hormones, what's going on with your overall health, and they'll give you a comprehensive treatment plan to address whatever it is that's happening. They're running special discounts for our ESPN 700 listeners. You have to tell them that OC sent you, and they're going to hook you up. Maybe it's the hair. They can fluff up the hairline. Don't be shy about any of the problems you're having. Give them a call, 801-877-9976. Book your consultation online at steelvault.com. There's a big Book Now button when you go to the website, and take advantage of the ESPN 700 discount, 20% for our listeners. They're hooking us up. Go check it out. Get your health looked at. Steel Vault Med Spa, right in the middle of the valley, in Holiday. We have some golf to give away. We have some tickets to give away. We've got the Festival of Teas continuing. 18 holes to Bonneville. That's coming up here in about 15 minutes. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700. Eric Church is coming to the Delta Center October 23rd. Tickets are on sale right now. Go to ESPN700sports.com for more details. Winding things down here on the Sean O'Connell Show, I wanted to make sure we hit on this. I'm fascinated by athletes who have, like, just quietly lucrative careers. Derek Carr has announced his retirement from the National Football League. And obviously, he's, a good quarterback. Solid. Never really was the catalyst behind any major winning runs for the Raiders or for the franchise he'll be retiring as a member of, the New Orleans Saints. The mechanisms of salary and bonus structure in professional sports are insane and almost impossible to understand when you work a regular job. He had to have believed, Mr. Carr, Derek Carr, had to have believed that this was a possibility 2.5 months ago, right? Like, that's a fair thing to say. You weren't only waiting to see what your team was going to do in the draft before you made a decision about your future. Maybe you were having conversations with your doctor about whether or not it was going to require surgery and rehab for you to get back on the field. And that was part of the calculus for Carr. But in March, he received a $10 million roster bonus for still being part of the roster. Now, quarterback money in the NFL right now is nuts. It's very insane. And so he was due $40 million this year. 10 of that came to him in March as a roster bonus. The other $30 million, he and the New Orleans Saints decided, well, since I'm retiring, you don't have to pay me that, even though it was part of his full guarantee. When he signed the deal, it was over $100 million, but $60 million was the guaranteed money. So as if he's doing a favor to the franchise, Carr says, you know what? I will wipe this out. I will give this back. But you got to let me keep the $10 million roster bonus I just collected, knowing that it was a very, very strong possibility that I was going to be retiring. And I don't begrudge him this. This is phenomenal, right? If you can pull this off, great. Good for you. I'm not crying for the New Orleans Saints. They're going to be profitable this year because the NFL is very profitable. Everyone's going to be fine. I don't cry for billionaires losing out on a little bit of extra money. But it is really fascinating how different that is from the people who are lining up to buy tickets and getting jerseys and all that kind of a thing. Imagine what your boss would say to you if they gave you some fat bonus for being on the staff in March. Hey, here is generational money for you and your family. Thanks for being part of this team. And then 2 months later, you're like, actually, I think I'm done. I think I'm going to quit. I think I'm retiring. I'm moving on. Your boss would be like, what? Don't worry. You don't have to pay me the rest of my salary this year. I know I don't. Of course, you're not going to be working. And also, I'm going to keep that bonus you gave me. What? No, the bonus was for being part of the team for this coming year. The fine print said the bonus was for being on the roster in March. So were you just hanging out and waiting for that thing to kick in before you told us? No. No, of course not. $10 million. And he gets to keep it. Bringing the total of career earnings for a guy who was he ever a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? Derek Carr? If so, he was like 8, 9, or 10. And not for any sustained period of time. $205 million of career earnings. Congratulations to that young man. By all accounts, really solid guy. Very outward and expressive with his Christian faith, which is not a popular thing to do anymore in professional sports, and I applaud him for being true to himself and for doing that. I think that's wonderful. But Derek Carr moving on, and we'll see if they go with, I guess, what do they have? Spencer Rattler in the building and Tyler Schuch. Was he ever a top 10 quarterback, James?
Maybe that first playoff year, 2016, I want to say, that he got hurt, so he didn't actually play in the playoff game. First playoff game in more than a decade at that time for the Raiders. Maybe that year, and maybe it was that injury that made him fall off, because he was rewarded handsomely. That's where most of his career earnings came from, was the next contract after that season. And it looked like the Raiders were a team on the rise, and then he was just decent at best after that. And I hate to say this now, because when guys decide to retire, as we're doing with Cam Rising, it's almost like what they say about people who've passed at their funeral, you're not allowed to say anything bad about them. But his Saints career, the Saints were about as good as I expected them to be when they signed him. He was looked at as, maybe the Saints can be Super Bowl contenders now because they had a great defense and they needed an upgraded quarterback. And Derek Carr looked like an upgraded quarterback, but he wasn't enough of an upgrade. They were about a 500 team at best when he played. I mean, that's about what I expected of them. Other people thought maybe they're Super Bowl contenders, and that's unfortunately, after that 1 year I'm referring to, that's kind of the career that Derek Carr had. But hey, I'm not going to cry for a guy who you just mentioned those career earnings. Like he should feel like he had a very successful career.
I mean, he did. He had a great career. 41,000 yards, averaged 7.1 yards per completion, 257 touchdown passes, 112 interceptions. So that's slightly better than 2-to-1 ratio.
He was like if your guy Brock Purdy doesn't have the team success that he had, it's like extrapolating the first couple of years individually that Brock Purdy has had in the NFL over an entire career, when the team is not Super Bowl caliber around him. That's kind of the career Derek Carr had. Nothing spectacular, but you also can't say he was a bad quarterback.
If I offered you, James, $677,000, would you go stand behind an offensive line in the NFL and allow someone to sack you?
Oof.
Almost $750,000.
I might do that. Yeah.
I just did. This is the most important stat that I've ever come up with myself. Derek Carr made $677.567.66 for every sack that he took in the NFL.
My gosh.
$205 million. He was sacked 303 times.
Lifetime health coverage. That would be a stipulation for me, and I think that pretty much is what you get with an NFL contract, a big NFL contract. Because you're taking, that's a violent thing you're asking me to do to get sacked a bunch like quarterbacks do in the NFL. For that, even for that money, I'd want to. Okay, I don't have to pay for any health procedures, right? If that's the case, yeah, I'll take that big chunk of change and deal with the health repercussions later.
$797,665 per touchdown pass over the course of his career. That's actually, when you look at the rates. If you break it down this way, and I know a lot of people don't, but I do, when you're talking about the average numbers that people have and how much they're getting paid per touchdown right now in the NFL, as wide receivers, it's anywhere from $2 to $2.5 million per touchdown, basically, is the going rate. The sack number went from about $1 million a sack as little as 5 years ago all the way up to about $2 million per sack. And if you're talking about Myles Garrett, it's more than that. So this is a bargain. Basically, he generated touchdowns for less than $1 million a piece.
Yeah.
as a passing quarterback, and all the targets now in the NFL, when you move forward, a lot of those big-time guys are going to be demanding twice that for a single touchdown.
Well, that tells you he threw a significant amount of touchdown passes then. If that's what the rate is, that's
257.
That's an impressive career for a guy who was, like you said, probably never a top 10 guy. Like, you look at that, just by looking at the numbers, you go, well, that he was better than I thought he was. He had better productivity than I thought he was. He just, unfortunately, a guy like Derek Carr, he played in the same era as Aaron Rodgers winning MVPs. Patrick Mahomes began his rise that he's on, and so many other guys that were just obviously better than him. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson.
What's really tough if you're a Derek Carr character here is that you're good, and good is the enemy of great when we're talking about the NFL, right? Never would it have made sense for Oakland or Vegas, for the Raiders, to be like, oh, we got to move on from him as a QB. He's just not there. I mean, a guy with a 65% completion percentage, he's given you anywhere from 3,200 to almost 5,000 yards per year in passing. He's given you, up to, let's see, his best passes thrown, 32 touchdown passes in 2015. Like, you got to look at these numbers, and it's easiest to do when you get it in retrospect.
Yeah.
But good is the enemy of great here. He never was the highest paid. He never was the best. He never was the guy who was going to get you all the way over the hump. And this is, again, you drew a great analogy, the Brock Purdy problem, right? He is Brock Purdy without the best roster in the world around you. So are you happy if that's what you get? Well, no, not at $49 million a year, whatever Brock Purdy wants.
And it's same kind of thing if you look at Kirk Cousins' career. I think Kirk Cousins has had a better career than Derek Carr. There's been times when you feel like Kirk Cousins has been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Not near top 5, but top 10, you would say. But he's good, not great. Just like you said, another guy that lots of teams would say that's an upgrade at the quarterback we have now. But is he great enough for you to get that to get to the Super Bowl, to win a Super Bowl like everyone's goal is? So for Kirk Cousins, unfortunately, that's not the case. That certainly was not the case for Derek Carr.
Kirk Cousins has right now about 2,000 yards more in passing than Derek Carr, and he played 3 more seasons.
Yeah. So a better version than Derek Carr for sure.
It's wild.
Yeah.
All right. We'll take a quick one. We're going to come back. We're going to give away some golf. It's the Sean O'Connell Show, Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. 18 holes to give away to Bonneville, which I'm told is one of the great courses here in the state. 877-353-0700. You got to answer the question via our text line. Festival of Tees, Utah Golf Association, Mountain America Credit Union, giving you 18 holes to Bonneville. If you could tell me the Utah Jazz highest they've ever drafted was number 2, what year did they make that selection? 877-353-0700. NBA Draft Lottery tonight. You can listen to it right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM immediately following The Drive. Spence Checketts is the host of The Drive. He joins us for some crosstalk. Brought to you by Burt Brothers. Burt Brothers does it better. Yeah.
That wasn't very good.
The duets, it's sometimes we're making it our own.
Well, we just started. Like we're a band that is in its infancy stage.
A boy band.
We could be a boy band.
Yeah.
You could be like the old strong dude. I'm like the young, good-looking guy who's in
You're
shape. And
7 years older than me.
I'm just the dynamic. Just the dynamic of the boy band.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, it's fair.
Nobody messes with us because of you. And I constantly need you to protect me from all the dudes whose wives wants to come see us sing because of me. It's like the dynamic.
Yeah. All right. Wow.
Does that work for you?
Weirdly, yes.
Okay.
It kind of does.
How is Bangladesh?
Belfast.
Belfast. Did you bring me back a baklava shake?
They don't have.
You could have stopped up the way. I'm not saying from there. I'm just saying today, did you bring one or no?
Well, no.
Okay.
I didn't.
Fair enough.
All right. They're not serving baklava shakes when I come here in the mornings.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
You can get your own baklava shake.
Okay, fine, Sean. I didn't know you were in a bad mood today. Jeez.
How interested are you in Michael Jordan, the basketball analyst?
Wildly interested for a lot of reasons. Now, my prediction, do you remember when Karl Malone randomly showed up and was like, why am I not coaching the Jazz? Why can't I be an assistant coach for the Jazz?
Through my eyes.
Yes, and Randy Rigby, the sweetest man alive, was like, all right, let's try this. And when I heard it, I said, that's lasting 2 weeks. Like his radio show, and love Carl, but when you have that type of money and you are used to that type of freedom, and suddenly you have to be somewhere on time to do a job, I don't think it's going to last. That's my prediction. Now, I hope that it does. When Michael Jordan was inducted into the Hall of Fame, it was the same class as Jerry Sloan. So my family was invited. So we had an opportunity to be there for Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech, where when you get unfiltered, probably a little tequila in him, little Michael Jordan, nobody's safe, dude. He went at everybody during that Hall of Fame speech. And we've heard all these things through the years that he hates Barkley because of all the things Charles has said about him. So I'm hoping we get like unfiltered Michael Jordan. If we do, it'll be awesome.
I'm hoping so too. It feels like it's going to be a hit or miss type of thing for me. It's either going to be the coolest or it's going to be.
Yeah. Or it might not last because you might just be like, oh, I forgot what responsibilities are like. I don't like to do this.
I want to know how much. Just somebody give me the stat. How many billionaires have then taken a regular job? Because he's a billionaire.
Right. Does not need the paycheck at all.
Which,
I'll be honest.
Shaq doesn't either at this point.
Yeah,
and neither does Chuck. None of those guys need the paycheck at this point.
Right.
But they're that's kind of like their thing. It's their routine. It's their habit now.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Jordan is fabulously wealthy, far more wealthy than anyone else. More so than Tom Brady, who's jumping into this world. Like, he sold the team, and he made $3 billion off it.
Yeah, and he was already a billionaire because of his stake in Air Jordan and Nike. I mean, the brand is his. So I hope it lasts. I don't know that it will, but only time will tell. Yeah, we'll see. But when I first saw the news, I'll be honest, I'm like, this is fake. There's no way he's doing this.
Okay.
Then dug into it. Okay, yeah, it's real. Hopefully it lasts.
So the drive today, just a 3-hour countdown toward the Jazz getting the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, hopefully, right? I mean, it's actually a really good day for this topic because according to Shams, Giannis is now open to being traded from Milwaukee. And after I saw the report, I went and dug into, I started listening to some of the NBA stuff on Sirius. I went and turned on some shows on television. And like every team that is in a rebuild mode was referenced as an option except the Jazz. People talked about Brooklyn. And there are also conversations about small markets like Oklahoma City and San Antonio and Houston. Well, Houston's not a small market, but San Antonio and OKC. And the Jazz just aren't an option because they don't have very many good players. And so there's not if the Jazz can get one tonight, and if they draft Cooper Flagg, it opens up so many doors. I mean, Lowry's a very good player, but nobody's like, yeah, I'm going to go play for the Jazz because I want to play with Larry Markkinen. No, they want to play with SGA or Wembanyama or whatever it is. The Jazz have to find one of those players, and the only avenue is through the draft. So hopefully they grab one tonight.
Stay tuned for the drive. Thanks for listening to the Sean O'Connell Show. 1980 is when the Utah Jazz drafted Darrell Griffith with the number 2 pick. So if you threw that one in, if you were the first person to throw that in correctly, you've got 18 holes to Bonneville, courtesy of the Utah Golf Association.
I got a time at Bonnie on Saturday. You in?
Nope.
Okay, yeah.
Not an American Credit
Just
Union.
go ahead and salt everything that's fun today, Sean.
Sorry,
Golf,
Matt.
baklava shakes, anything else? Duke is parked next to the fan. You want to make fun of my dog while you're at it?
I'm not in a position to make fun of your dog yet because my dog cannot yet beat up your dog.
Well, that will happen. I've
But
seen
then
pictures of your dog as a puppy.
Give it like 3 more months.
Yeah, it's going to be a big boy.
Stay tuned for the drive. We're out on the Sean O'Connell Show. We'll do it again tomorrow. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.